y sin ventura nunca llegué a nacer. Mis ojos se hincharon de tanto mirar la mar. Vapóricos van y vienen, letra para mí no hay. Vapóricos van y vienen, letra para mí no hay. Es hermoso, dos caras tiene con él, la una que arrolla dos, la otra que echa sheshbesh, la una que arrolla dos, la otra que echa sheshbesh. Mi querido es alto y vano y una vara de expander. Mi madre hizo colada, lo metió a detener. Mi madre hizo colada, lo metió a detener. La, 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 la. שיר למעלות הערים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. שיר למעלות, אשא עיני אל ההרים, עזרי מהמים וארץ, אל ינום שומרך. ולא יישן שומר ישראל, השם שומר ימינך, וירא הרע ישמור צאתך ובואך. שיר למעלות, אשא עיני אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im. Oh, shoot, that's about to go out of battery. Okay, I can deal with that afterwards. 1 second, please. Can you guys hear me okay? Let me just do a sound check first. It sounds a bit strange here. 1 second. What's going on? Maybe this. Hello? Sound check. Am I on this thing? I am. 1 second. Okay. Hello? I don't know why it's doing what it's doing, but all right, whatever. So welcome to, actually, let me get off this thing altogether. Oh, 1 second. Okay, can you guys hear me now? You can hear? Okay. All right, let's try that again. Shabbat Shalom and welcome to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im Torah study. I am Hakham Melech ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, and we're getting off to a little bit of a late start today, but that's okay. We're in Parshat Shmini, which is Leviticus 9 through 11, basically Leviticus chapters 9, 10, and 11. And we will get into that in a little while. In fact, maybe we should start right away. So let me bring that up. Just give me 1 second, please. Let's see here. All right, I'm going to bring that up. But I think we're going to do something a little bit different. So if you remember last week, we went through Leviticus chapters 1. Well, no. We went through basically chapter 3, okay? Went to the what's called the fellowship offering or the shlamim, okay? And then we said there are 5 main types of offerings. So we went through the first 3. Let me share the screen here for a second. Present your screen. Window. Torah. Okay. So we went through chapters 1 through 3, and we're speaking about the different types. I mean, in the past 2 weeks, we went through chapters 1 through 3, and we were speaking about the different types of offerings, right? So we started with what is usually translated as the burnt offering. We called it a holy burnt offering, or also called the Holocaust offering. That's actually where you get the word Holocaust from. You know, the thing that happened to us in World War II. It comes from the way that this type of offering was often translated. It was often translated as a Holocaust offering, which means hollow, meaning whole, and cost, meaning like caustic. Something is caustic, it burns, so holy burnt. And the idea of the holy burnt offering or the Holocaust offering in Hebrew, it's called an oleh. So I like to translate it as an everything goes up in smoke offering, because oleh means everything is thrown on the altar, or maybe everything is burnt on the altar. So we spoke about that, which is the most basic type of offering. Usually other offerings accompany the burnt offering. Then we spoke about the grain offering, and we learned a lot of very interesting things about it. One of the things we learned about it was that it is not to be made with leaven. Okay, let's even find that verse for a second in the English. Make a handful of oil. 1 second. Without yeast. So if you bring in grain, well, these are different types of grain offering. Well, I can't find a general statement, but we can see here, for instance, if you bring a grain offering baked in an oven, it consists of the finest flour made without yeast. Let's see if we can find the put oil. I can't find it right now. Here it is. Every grain offering, Leviticus 2:11. Every grain offering you bring to Yahweh must be made without yeast, for you are not to burn any yeast or honey in a food offering presented to Yahweh. So we saw that all grain offerings have to be matzah. They have to be unleavened bread, okay, of different types. They could be baked in an oven. They could be cooked on a griddle, cooked on a frying pan. They can even just be handfuls of flour, but they cannot be leavened bread. And then someone asked an interesting question. And if you give me 1 second, I think I'm going to grab some water. I'll be right back. Somebody asked an interesting question, which was, well, what about the 2 loaves that are offered on Shavuot? We see in Leviticus 23. I'll stick with the English for now, just because it's not the main part of what we're going to study today. So just to make it flow a little bit more, okay? So, Festival of Weeks. So Leviticus 23:17 says, from wherever you live, bring 2 loaves made of 2/10 of an ephah of finest flour baked with yeast as a wave offering of first fruits to Yahweh, baked with yeast. That's interesting. Didn't Leviticus, I'll open it up in 2 different windows. Let's see if I can do it this way. Didn't Leviticus chapter 2 just tell us that a grain offering to Yahweh is not supposed to be with yeast, right? Every grain offering you bring to Yahweh must be made without yeast, for you not to burn any yeast or honey in a food offering presented to Yahweh. Okay, and we spoke about this. Excuse me, seeming contradiction, and we spoke about how it's really not a contradiction at all. It's a very simple answer. Does anybody remember what that answer is? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Well, it's a very simple answer, actually. Okay, what we're speaking about here in Leviticus 2 are fire offerings. Each of these types of grain offerings that are spoken about in Leviticus 2, okay, are to be thrown, a portion of them are to be thrown on the altar of sacrifice. Okay, where's the altar of sacrifice? Let's bring up our map again. tabernacle map, not app, map. Tabernacle map. Come on, you can do it. There we go. I think this is the one we were using. Good enough, even if it isn't. Bring it up. The internet is a bit slow here today. Come on. You can do it. One sec. All right, it's going to take a second. Yeah, we're having some problems with the internet. As I mentioned, we ordered about a little bit less than a year ago, we ordered Starlink, the Elon Musk thingy, where basically you use satellite dishes to get internet, and it works excellent. It's amazing. It's super fast. However, unfortunately, it after a storm recently, it went down. So we're waiting for a new kit to arrive from Starlink. And in the meantime, I have to use the backup internet, which is much slower. So there may be some problems, as you can see here. It may take some time to for everything to come up, but that's okay. We'll just do the best we can. Let me do what I usually do to bring this up a little bit better. So that's desktop. And just give me a second here. Open file. Desktop. And what just happened? Where did my screenshot go? Oh, darn. Let's try that again. Okay, well, we'll get back to that in a second. Oh, here it comes. Try this again. Save. Oh, jeez. Checked all. Get out of here, you. Okay. Okay, let's try this one more time. Save as. Web page, desktop. I see. I have to do it this way. One second. I just got to take a screenshot of it. There we go. Now we'll go to the desktop. Oh, we can just leave it right like this. Okay, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so we see this is the altar of sacrifice right here. What they is written here is a brazen altar. Why is it called the brazen altar? Because it's made of acacia wood, and then it's overlaid with bronze. Okay, it's overlaid with bronze. Remember when the Israelites were in the desert when they made the tabernacle? This was the end of the Bronze Age. They were still in the Bronze Age. And so you see a lot of bronze being used for stuff, including for the altar. Okay, it's made out of bronze. Shabbat shalom, Paul. How are you? Good to see you, my friend. Okay, so so we see that in Leviticus chapter 2, where it says that the grain offering must not be made with yeast. It must be made without yeast. It has to be unleavened bread. We see that's referring to what's called fire offerings. Okay, every single one of these offerings that are mentioned in Leviticus chapter 2, okay, whether it's baked in an oven, I'm not going to go all through different types now. Here, cooked in a pan, cooked on a griddle, and there are a couple of other types. Every single one of them, you take a piece of the offering and you throw it on to the altar of sacrifice. Okay, so it's a fire offering. Let's see here. Where does it specifically says? What does it specifically say? Fire offering. Well, it doesn't in general, but you can see each one of these is a fire offering. Okay. However, in Leviticus chapter 23, this is not a fire offering. This is a wave offering. Okay. You never take any of the grain or the bread or the unleavened bread of Leviticus chapter 2 and throw it onto the altar of sacrifice. You come on Shavuot, you take 2 loaves of wheat, bread made out of wheat flour, out of the finest wheat flour, because Shavuot is a holiday celebrating the first fruits of the wheat harvest. Okay, we all know, especially us as Karaites, and especially one of us here, Bruce, definitely knows that he's an expert in this, that the first crop to ripen, or the first grain to ripen in Israel is the barley. It ripens right around Passover time. In fact, this coming week is going to be the new moon, and we're going to talk about, not in the study, but we'll have the Aviv report coming up soon. And so what we do there, how do we celebrate, or how do we offer the first fruits of the barley harvest, which is the first harvest in the agricultural cycle of the land of Israel? That's the Omer offering that's mentioned in Leviticus 23 also, right? This is the Omer offering right here. This is offering the first fruits, et cetera, et cetera. We know what the Omer offering is. You take an Omer of the first fruits of the barley harvest and you wave it. So it's also a wave. It's a Tnufat Omer. It's also a wave offering, okay? And you wave it, different interpretations. You either lift it up or you wave it. But we'll go with wave. You wave it, you bring it to the temple, and then you wave it, and then that is the first fruits offering of the barley harvest. Okay. So after the Omer offering, we know that we count the Omer offering is brought the day after the Shabbat, right? So we Karaites interpret that as being brought on what we call today a Sunday. Then we count 49 days. The 50th day, or we count from the Shabbat, 49 days. The 50th day is Shavuot, and we bring a new offering, okay? Then present an offering of new grain to Yahweh, and this time it's the first fruits of the wheat offering. The first fruits of the wheat harvest, okay? And these first fruits of the wheat harvest, and the wheat harvest is the second major harvest in the land of Israel, and anyone who lives in the land of Israel knows that it is going to be indeed about 50 days, right? 50 days is, let's say, a month and a half after the barley harvest. After the barley becomes ripe, the wheat is going to become ripe. The wheat becomes ripe after the barley. So we take the first fruits of the wheat harvest. We take the wheat, we grind it into flour, we bake it into leavened bread, and then we bring it again to the tabernacle, to the tent of meeting, and then we wave it, and that signifies the first fruits of the wheat harvest. Okay, the first fruits offering always represents the idea that until you've brought that offering, you cannot eat of that harvest, because the first and the best goes to God. It doesn't go to us. First, we give the portion to Yahweh, and we give the finest portion to Yahweh, and then we could sit down and eat. It's like if you were sitting at a table with the king eats first. You don't serve yourself first and then serve the king second. First, you serve the king, then you serve yourself. And this is the idea we see with these two first fruits offerings of the grain, and we also have a first fruits offering of the fruits. Right, that's when you put it in the basket and bring it to the Kohen and say, Arami Oved Avi, my father was a wandering Aramean, or an Aramean tried to destroy my father. Depending on how you interpret it, there are different interpretations. So at any rate, these first fruit offerings are not fire offerings, and that therefore they can be made out of leavened bread, and are in fact instructed in the case of the Shavuot offering, are instructed to be made specifically out of leavened bread. So therefore, there's no contradiction whatsoever. The grain offerings that are being spoken about in Leviticus chapter 2 are not our fire offerings. They're thrown on the altar, and you're not allowed to throw leavened bread on the altar. As it says right here in Leviticus chapter 2, verse 12, you may not bring them to Yahweh as an offering of the first fruits. You may bring them to Yahweh. Let's start here, okay? Verse 11, every grain offering you bring to Yahweh must be made without yeast, for you do not to burn any yeast or honey in a food offering presented to Yahweh. You may bring them to Yahweh as an offering of the first fruits, but they are not to be offered on the altar as a pleasing aroma. Okay? So that we see is no contradiction whatsoever. Grain offerings, where you take a portion of the offering and you throw it onto the altar of sacrifice. Okay? The slaughter table, as Everett Fox interprets it or translates it as, these cannot be leavened. These must be unleavened things. It could be. We saw different types. It can either be baked in an oven. It can be made in a griddle. It could be made on a frying pan, like a deeper griddle. It can be just a handful of flour. Okay, handful of flour with oil. It can be parched grain. Okay. As in verse 14, but it cannot be leavened bread. Leavened bread is not to be thrown on the altar, okay? And then somebody asked, or maybe we spoke about it, maybe I just mentioned it without anybody asking, why does it mention honey? For you not to burn any yeast or honey in a food offering presented to Yahweh. Where does honey come from? Well, anybody have an answer to that one? So Paul says on the 50th day, or count 50, then the next day. No, you count 49. So the Omer offering is day 1, and then you count, it doesn't say you count 40, it does. It says you count 7 Shabbats. So that would be, the first Shabbat would be day 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, 42. Then the 7th Shabbat would be day 49. And then it says Lamachurat Shabbat. On the day following the Shabbat is when you bring a new offering of 2 loaves of leavened bread made out of wheat. Okay, so it's on the 50th day after the Shabbat. It's on the 49th day after the Omer offering, on the 50th day after the Shabbat, from the day after which the Omer offering is counted. Okay, it's basically 49 days after the Omer offering. The Omer offering is brought on a quote unquote Sunday, and Shavuot falls on a Sunday. And Paul, I'll point you to an article I wrote a number of years ago on Karaite Insights. Let me see if I can get it, which will explain everything in detail. So it's called On This Very Day, and it really goes into detail about the counting. Okay, so I'll post it here. I'll post it in the comments, and you can look through it if you wish. Okay, so that was Leviticus 2. Leviticus 2 is grain offerings. Then we spoke about, in Leviticus chapter 3, we spoke about what's usually translated, or what's often translated, as peace offerings. We saw it as fellowship offerings, or it's translated here as fellowship offerings. We saw that Robert Alter translates it as, what was his word he used? Communion offerings. Okay, so it's this idea of somehow connecting with God. In Hebrew, it's called shlamim. Okay, the type of offering is a shlamim, which again, shalom means peace, but it's understood somehow or another that you bring it to Yahweh when you want to somehow connect with Him, thank Him, express gratitude, maybe something along those lines. There are other types of things you can bring when you want to express gratitude, but usually the shlamim, the peace offering, as it's usually translated, is associated with good stuff. It's associated with happy stuff, as opposed to, let's say, the next type of offering that we're going to talk about, which is the sin offering, is associated with repentance, or with compensation for negative stuff that might have been done. Okay, and so we said, why do we want to understand these different types of sacrifices? Because we see them throughout the Tanakh. You could be reading along in the Tanakh, and you could see, I don't know, David sacrificed burnt offerings and peace offerings, and et cetera, and we usually don't have context for this. What we remember, oh yeah, somewhere in the beginning of Leviticus, it may have mentioned it and it may have explained what it is, but not only was I sleeping during that parsha in the Beit Knesset, because it was so boring, as I always like to call it. It was Torah flyover country. Nobody, people like to hear about the Nadab, and they like to hear about, let's say, the golden calf, and really interesting chase scenes and stuff like that. But when it comes to this technical details about the sacrifices, about the laws of purity and impurity, and all the rest of that stuff, that's Torah flyover country. Yawning. And I've literally, as I mentioned last time, I've literally seen rabbis, when someone else is doing the Torah reading, I've literally seen rabbis fall asleep during these readings, but they'll never fall asleep, let's say, during the reading of, I don't know, the story of the spies or something like this. So one of the things we want to show is this is not Torah flyover country. This is really interesting and fascinating stuff. And as I mentioned last week and the week before when we started, it forms a whole system which is very beautiful. And when you understand what these different types of what these different types of offerings are, and how they work, and what the differences are between them, then when you're reading through the rest of the Tanakh and you see, I don't know, I'm making it up, I don't remember, Samuel sacrificed, peace offerings and a goat as a guilt offering, and blah blah blah. It gives it a lot more context. Okay, and that's what we want to do. So one of the big differences we spoke about, as I mentioned, is that in Leviticus 1, we start off with, again, what's usually translated as the burnt offering. we're translating it as a holy burnt offering or a Holocaust offering or an everything goes up in flames offering. The entire animal, except for the skin and the entrails and with the bird, what they usually translate as a crop, is thrown onto the altar. Basically, some of the less desirable, a couple of the less desirable parts are discarded and thrown on the ash heap, but everything else goes on to the onto the altar and is burnt. When you get to the other types of offerings, or the other two we've seen so far, we see that only a portion gets thrown onto the altar and the rest go to the Kohanim. So the grain offering, a piece is broken off, thrown onto the altar, and then the rest is a gift to the Kohanim. But not the case with the burnt offering, okay? In the case of the peace offering, it's the same thing. We saw that the forbidden fats, and we spoke about the aliyah and its relevance to shawarma, right, which has the fat tail dripping down onto what's usually turkey meat to trick people into thinking they're eating lamb when they're actually eating at best turkey, and God knows what else is in there, maybe mystery meat. But at any rate, the fats are thrown onto the altar, okay, and some other portions, and the rest is given to the Kohanim as their salary, basically, as their gift, their present, okay? We know in all cases what we've seen so far, whether it's a mammal that's sacrificed, whether it's a bird that's sacrificed, the blood is always spilled at the bottom of the altar. It's spilled around the altar, okay? In the case of the bird, it says it's sprinkled on the side of the altar, but same idea, okay? The blood does not go on the altar. The blood is not eaten by us human beings. The blood is spilled on the altar, right? We know from the story of Noah that the life of the animal, the life of the individual, the life of the creature is in the blood. And so the blood is not given to God. It's not given to us. It's spilled. It is spilled on at the base of the altar, because essentially what we're doing when we bring sacrifices is we're substituting life for life. We are substituting the life of this animal for our own life. In other words, saying, well, we've done something wrong. It's not always wrong, but let's say in a case where it's compensation or atonement for some kind of sin, we've done something wrong. Maybe we should have died, but now this animal is gonna take the blame for us. They are going to be our sacrifice. We're sacrificing the animal for ourselves, and that's why when you bring these animals, as we saw in the case of both the holy burnt offering, and in the case of the fellowship or the communion offering, the peace offering, this one in Leviticus 3, the person who brings it, he lays his hands on the animal, he lays his hands on the head of the animal, and he slaughters the animal, and only after that the Kohen takes over and does the rest of the stuff. Okay. All right, so that's kind of a background of what we spoke about and what we learned. And I don't know where everyone is today. We usually have a lot more, maybe because I advertised it a little bit late, but hopefully people start showing up. Nonetheless, let's go on, okay? So that's Leviticus chapter 3. That is, again, what's usually translated as the peace offering. And so let me explain how I want to do the Torah study today, okay? So we're really supposed to be way ahead. We're supposed to be now in Leviticus 9. And as I've always said, the parshas should be a guideline. We don't have to stick to them, okay? We try to stick to them, and we'll try to stick to it to a certain degree today. But we're supposed to be in Leviticus 9 through Leviticus 11. If I go for a second to Leviticus 9, okay, then we have, let's go back a bit. So, all right, let's go back actually to, so Leviticus 1 through 7 is all the details of the different types of sacrifices. And then in Leviticus 8, we have the installation of the priests of the Kohanim. That's Leviticus 8. Then we start our parsha here in Leviticus 9. The priests actually begin doing the stuff that we've been learning about. And then in Leviticus 10, we have the death of Nadav and Avihu, and that's narrative for the most part, right? So we definitely want to cover that. It's important. And then in Leviticus 11, we have the laws of kashrut. So we have a lot of important stuff here, okay? So what I really want to do is this. I would like to finish, I would like to go back first to Leviticus chapter 4 and at least go through the different types of sacrifices. So we've gone through the first 3. I'd like to go through the 4th type and maybe the 5th type today, and then go back to some of the narrative stuff that's in our part of the story of Nadav and Abihu, and then maybe go on to some of the kashrut stuff, although we've spoken about it extensively in previous years. So it's actually not a priority for me to go through it this year. Of course, it's important, but we've spoken about it so much in the past that I'd like to focus on other things this year, okay? What I'd really like to do is get through the different types of offerings, look at some of the similarities and differences between these different types of offerings, again, so that this does not become just ignored flyover country when you're reading through the Torah, because understanding the different types of sacrifices really opens a lot of understanding when you're reading through the rest of the Tanakh. And I think it's absolutely fascinating when you compare and you contrast and you see what each of the different types of offerings are used for. I really think it brings a lot more depth to understanding the sacrificial system, which is so central. And oh, here's Phil. Welcome, Phil. Shabbat Shalom. Which is so central and so critical to understanding so much of what's going on in the Tanakh. So with that in mind, we're going to now go on to the fourth type of offering. So the first type, again, was the burnt offering, or what we're calling the Holocaust, or everything goes up in flames offering. The second type was the grain offering, specifically the fire offerings of grain, where a portion is thrown onto the fire. We saw it cannot have leavened bread. And honey, oh, I never mentioned the reason for the honey. The reason, very briefly, for the honey is because when you leaven bread, we know, anyone who makes bread today knows that when you want to feed the yeast, you have to feed it. It will eat better if you put something in the initial water. Sometimes they use milk with the yeast, but we'll just go with water. So a lot of people today will put sugar, and that becomes food for the yeast. Well, in ancient times, they didn't have sugar. Sugar is from the New World, if I'm not mistaken. They used honey. So when it mentions the honey, this was a part and parcel of making leavened bread. You would take the yeast. It wasn't yeast you bought in the store. You didn't go to the Super Soul or the Piggly Wiggly, or where I am, let's say the Pingo Doce, and buy yeast. No, you used what's called sourdough starter. It was concentrated yeast, and not just yeast, but yeast, bacteria, and just an entire ecosystem of various organisms, and they needed to eat. So you would add honey, and this would be their food instead of what we use today as sugar. So the honey would accelerate the leavening process, and that's why it's mentioned along with yeast. Okay. All right. Let me close this out. Leviticus 4. So now we're going to switch over to Hebrew. I'm going to open up our usual various commentators that we look at. Let me leave this up. So, of course, as I always mention, I like to use Robert Alter as a go-to. I'm not worshiping at the altar of Robert Alter. I don't agree with everything he says, but I as I've mentioned many times, I find his translation and interpretation very accessible. So that is the reason that I usually start with him as a go-to. So let me bring that up. Then we've got our, come on, you can come up. Then we've got our buddy Everett Fox, who you can find online if you type in Everett Fox translation, or what is it called again? Yeah, the Shokin Bible. You'll be able to find this online. You can also find the Robert Alter online if you look. And this is also a very good translation. There's no commentary here. He did make some commentaries on various parts of the Torah, but this is just a translation. But it's a very good translation. He really thinks carefully about the meaning of the Hebrew and tries to find the appropriate translations into English that express as best as he can the essence of the Hebrew. So it's an excellent translation. And then we have our others that we go to. But let's start with that. So let me bring up Robert Alter here. So Leviticus. And we're Leviticus chapter 4. So that's our roadmap for today. We're going to go through the sin offering. Then we'll go over to Nadav and Avihu to get some narrative, right? To get a couple of chase scenes in there. And then if there's still time, which there may or may not be, then we'll go over to Leviticus chapter 11 and speak a bit about what we call today kashrut. Okay? 888. I think that's good luck if you're Chinese. Oops. Cool. So here's Leviticus chapter 4. And let's see if we can get an intro from Robert Alter as to what this, and let's see how he translates it, first of all. So the standard translation is the sin offering, right? Is that the way the NIV translates it? Yes, sin offering, okay? Robert Alter and Everett Fox, as I mentioned, they're usually a bit more careful with their choice of words. So let's see. I know that Robert Alter, he has a whole idea on this. So Robert Alter doesn't call it a sin offering. Okay. Let's see what he calls it. Where is it? Well, we'll get to it. Okay. So let's start in, and let me bring this up. So it's going to be about 120 maybe. No, 220, 120. Leviticus chapter 4. Okay. So let's just get in with the Hebrew, and we'll get back to those guys in a little bit. Okay. So we're in Leviticus chapter 4, verse 1, and follow along in the Hebrew, follow along in the English if you're still working on your Hebrew or whatever language you want. And here we go. Leviticus chapter 4. Yidaber Yahweh el Moshe lemor. So Yahweh spoke to Moses saying, standard opening, right? Daber el bnei Israel lemor nefesh ki techta bishchaga mikol miswoth Yahweh asher lo te asena ve'asa me'hat mehena. Okay, so speak to the children of Israel, say, nefesh ki techta bishchaga. Any person, anyone who sins, okay, takta, who sins bishchaga, accidentally, mikol miswot Yahweh, from among all the commandments of Yahweh, asher lo te'asena, in other words, which should not be done. In any words, if you sin in any of the prohibitions, so what would be an example of that? You're not supposed to eat a dead animal, let's say, and you ate a dead animal, an animal that died on its own. You are, as the rabbis like to say, you're over al lav. You've transgressed a negative commandment, and this is what this is speaking about here. Okay, and has done one of them. Okay, so what's the setup here? Okay, what we're going to learn about now is what happens if you have inadvertently transgressed a negative commandment. So to use the example of a nevela, of a dead animal, I don't know, you went to the refrigerator and you saw a hamburger there. You were visiting your friends in Texas. My Texas friends know I always like to pick on them. You were visiting your friends in Texas, and you went to the into the refrigerator and you saw a hamburger there, and you cooked it up on the grill out in the back, and then your friends, while your friends were away, and then they came home and they said, where's the they went to the refrigerator and said, hey, where's the opossum that I killed out on the interstate? I put it in the I chopped it up and put it in the refrigerator, and I don't see it there. And you're like, oops, I just had it for dinner. And I thought that was I thought you'd left that for dinner for me. Well, that would be an example of doing something by mistake. Okay, you didn't know this was roadkill off of the interstate, right? Something that you always need to be careful of when you're visiting your friends in Texas. And you thought it was a hamburger from the Piggly Wiggly, and now you're screwed. Okay, you just ate nivela, and not only was it nivela, but it was unkosher nivela. Okay, now you're in trouble. Okay, so Shabbat Shalom, Tsuriel, Shabbat Shalom. Okay, so that would be an example of what we're talking about here. Okay, so how do you deal with that? You've now transgressed the negative commandment by mistake. It wasn't on purpose. Okay, and now you've got to make up for it. Okay. This will not go unaccounted for. Verse 3. Ima kohen ha-Mashiach yachta le'ashmat ha'am. Okay, so now we're talking about, we'll get that in a second. Well, let's do it. Okay, let's talk about the first half of this verse, and we always like to separate the verses into two. I like to call them verselets because it sounds nicer, but I think the technical term is actually a verset, into two half verses, and usually almost all verses in the Torah are separated into two by this little symbol here, this little wishbone symbol, called in Ashkenazi Hebrew as an nachta, and in more standard grammatical Hebrew an atnach. Okay, but that little wishbone symbol, you can think of it as a semicolon. It basically separates the verses into two sub-verses. Okay, so ima kohen Mashiach yachtel ashmat ha'am. So now we're talking about, now we're going to work our way from the top down. Okay, so we have the general setup. The general setup is somebody has done a no-no by mistake. Okay, somebody's been a bad boy, but it was by mistake. So now we're talking about from the top down. We're talking about the Kohen Gadol, the chief kahuna. Okay, the high priest. Okay, a Kohen HaMashiach. So literally, that means the anointed Kohen. You see the word Mashiach. That's exactly, precisely the same word as the word Messiah. Okay, I'm sure you guys know this already, especially those who have done their stint in the past in Christianity. But the word Messiah means anointed. And why is the Messiah called the anointed one, or why is the anointed one called the Messiah? The reason is that the king is anointed with oil when he's ordained, right? That's where you get this idea of the Messiah. He's going to be the anointed king, or the officially ordained or appointed king of Yahweh. Okay, but really, it just means Mashiach. Just means anointed with the anointing oil. It just means the anointing oil is poured on his head. Okay, and it's another way of saying it, officially ordained. It's another way of saying it's the ceremony that signifies that that person is officially ordained. In this case, we're not talking about the king. We're talking about the chief. We're talking about the high priest, and he's here called a Kohen HaMashiach, the anointed priest. Okay, so if he should sin, and again, the context here is by mistake, and sinned by transgressing a negative commandment. So this Kohen Gadol, if the high priest should sin, lashmat am, okay, to the guilt of the entire nation. So if he sins, it affects the entire nation. So what would be an example of his sinning? Well, maybe he was in a state of impurity when he offered sacrifices, okay, or maybe he did something incorrect in the details of the rules of offering the sacrifices. Okay, this is a big no-no. Yahweh puts down these very exact laws for a reason. They're supposed to be followed to a T, and if you don't follow them to a T, then that's a big no-no. Yahweh is kind of, the Torah is kind of very flexible in certain things, like for instance, the leaving the edges of the field, what's called the pe'ah. You're supposed to leave the edges of the field for the poor. Yahweh doesn't tell us exactly how much those edges should be. Each person uses their own judgment, how much of the field they're going to leave to the poor, okay? But in certain cases, he's very exact. And if he's very exact, there's a reason for it. He wants things a certain way. Hey, he's the boss. It's his house. He gets to choose how he wants things done. And so if something is done incorrectly, then, there's a price to pay for that. And especially one of the major things that the Torah, even the Tanakh, but especially the book of Leviticus is concerned, one can even say obsessed about, is the idea of what's usually called purity and impurity. I don't like those words. It's a matter of being clean and unclean. Sometimes they'll translate as ritually clean and ritually unclean. We'll talk about it a lot more when we get to it. We'll just go with clean and unclean. Is making sure that everything is in a state of cleanliness or purity when you are near the house of God. The Kohanim, everything that's brought, everything has to be in a state of purity. And if something is not in a state of purity, then you are dirtying up Yahweh's house. Okay, it would be like walking into the White House with dog crap on your shoe, or walking in the Lincoln bedroom with dog crap on your shoes. Okay, you better check before you go into Lincoln's bedroom that you don't have dog crap on your shoes, because then you haven't only defiled the room, but you've defiled the essence of the very history and essence of the United States of America by tracking dog poop into Lincoln's bedroom. Okay, maybe that would be a decent analogy. Moshiach, correct, means redeemer, and that would be with an ayin. So Moshiach is someone who redeems, literally someone who causes redemption. And this is a different word. So this is not Moshiach, this is Mashiach. This is someone who is anointed, okay? And it's not a verb, it's an adjective. So it's often translated as anointed one or the anointed, okay? It's an adjective that comes from the root or from the verb mashach, which means to anoint, literally to pour oil, the anointing oil over. Okay, so well, we're talking about the Kohen Gadol, Ikriv al hatato asher chata. So now he's going to offer, because of his sin, his inadvertent sin, he's going to offer what? Par ben bakar tamim liyahweh lehatat. Okay, so he's going to offer a par. Let's go to let me bring it up. Give me 1 second. Our spreadsheet with all of our animal names. 1 secundo. How are you? Where did I put that? Animal names. Oh, okay. Just give me a second, everyone, please. Okay, Torah sheets. 1 second, guys. One second. Bring that up. That should do it. Okay. And there we have it. Okay. So we want to go to our animal names. So anyone who's done the Torah studies with me know that this is a work in progress. It's a constantly growing spreadsheet with a whole bunch of different relevant individual spreadsheets. And as I always say, if anybody would like access to this, meaning read-only access, I don't want anyone going in there and I don't know, putting Baba Booey in cell C7 or something like that. So it'd be read-only access. Then let me know, because there's a lot of stuff that we often talk about in the Torah studies, and it's a work in progress. At any rate, so we have the Kohen Gadol has done something wrong by mistake, and now he has to bring what does he have to bring? Par ben bakar. So let's look at our vocabulary here. So let's find par. Here we go, par. So that's a baby male bull. Okay, baby. When it says a baby, it usually means up to 1 year old. Okay, so it's a calf, I guess, right? See, this is why we did the spreadsheet, because even in English, the words are, unless you've grown up as a rancher or a farmer, sometimes a lot of these words are even hard to know what they are in English, right? Like I always give an example. What's a heifer? What's a ewe? What's a ute? Did you say ewe? What is a ewe? At any rate, so Par ben Bakar, so this is going to be basically it's going to be a baby bull. Tamim, we know what that means, unblemished. So it's not going to be missing an ear or missing an eye or having horrible scars or you don't bring to Yahweh anything but the best. It has to be the top animals. You don't give him the leftovers. So unblemished means one that is in top-notch condition. Okay, it doesn't have any. It's not diseased or sick or castrated or any of those things. So you bring to Yahweh is a chatat. So you're bringing this So he's bringing one baby bull, one calf, one male calf, okay, to Yahweh as a chatat. And here we have that word chatat, usually translated as a sin offering. But is it a sin offering? No, it's not what does that mean, a sin offering? Wouldn't a better translation for that be something along the lines of a recompense or reconciliation for sin, right? Isn't this what this offering is doing? You've sinned, or in this case, the Kohen Gadol has sinned, and now he's going to bring an offering to atone for his sinning. And that's where we're going to get now to some of the translations. So let's start with Everett Fox, and this is verse 3. So he calls it, interestingly enough, a hatat. That's just transliteration of the Hebrew. He calls it a decontamination offering. That's an interesting phrase. Robert Alter in verse 3 calls it not a sin offering. Let's find him. For the herd, an offense offering. Okay. And now he's going to explain why he chooses that word, an offense offering. 1 second, please. All right, so let's get an explanation of why Robert Alter calls it an offense offering. That's an interesting translation. So he says the traditional translation of this term is sin offering. Milgram, and we've spoken about Milgram. In fact, well, we don't need to bring it up right now, but he is arguably one of the world's, I think he's dead. I'm pretty sure he's dead, was one of the world's leading experts on the book of Leviticus and on the entire sacrificial system. Okay, so Milgram argues in elaborate detail that this is a misrepresentation of the Hebrew hatat and proposes purification offering as a precise English equivalent. The verb chatah in the Kal congregation, as in verse 2 here, means to commit an offense, a term probably taken over from the political to the cultic realm. Okay, the same root in the PL conjugation means to remove or cancel. One well-attested semantic function of this conjugation to remove or cancel the offense. The noun hatat is derived from the PL conjugation, and hence the canceling out effect. Purification is in fact implied. It is not cognate with the verb to offend, and the context makes clear enough that an offense offering is a sacrifice that removes the effect of the offense. And I think this is the key here, okay? The sacrifice, or this offering, is a sacrifice that removes the effects of the offense, okay? So Robert Alter calls it an offense offering. He points out that that Milgram, again, one of the world's leading experts on the book of Leviticus, calls it a purification offering for reasons that are a bit technical. I won't get into here, but it's in a certain sense, you could say it's purifying yourself from the sin you committed. Okay, and Robert Alter calls it an offense offering. Everett Fox calls it a decontamination offering, which is, I guess, similar to Milgram's idea of the purification offering, decontamination, purification. Okay, the idea is here. And let me just check one thing here. 1 second. Okay. 1 second. 1 second. one second. יחטא להשמת העם הקריב על חטאתו אשר חטא בין בקר תמים ליהוה לחטאת. Okay. All right. I was just checking something myself. So anyway, getting back to this, okay? So I think the key here is that it's an offering. It's a sacrifice that moves the effects of an offense, okay? Of an inadvertent sin or an inadvertent offense. This sacrifice cancels the sin. So maybe what Milgram and Robert Alter and Everett Fox are arguing in their translations is that sin offering, which is the traditional translation for it. So we look at the NIV in English. Bring up the NIV in English. Okay, the NIV in verse 3 translates it as a sin offering. And that is the traditional, actually, is a footnote here, or purification offering here and throughout this chapter. Okay, so they actually do have a footnote, but the standard translation is a sin offering. And the reason that it's usually called the sin offering is because that is it's because in Hebrew the word is chatat, and the underlying root chata means to sin, okay, to transgress. And here, in fact, we see that it says if the Kohen Gadol will sin, okay, will make an offense or make a sin, meaning he'll transgress one of the negative commandments by mistake, okay, then because of his sin, so here and here it clearly means his sin or his offense, okay, he shall bring a chatat, he shall bring a sin offering. So it's the same, in Hebrew it seems like the same word. To get a bit technical, Milgram says it's not precisely the same word, that this is a different a shade of that word. And so actually what this means here is a purification from the sin that he has done. At any rate, what we see here clearly is that this offering is not, or that the translation sin offering is not, doesn't really encapsulate the essence of what this offering does, because it sounds like a sin offering. Okay, I'm just bringing it, I've committed a sin and now I'm going to bring an offering, okay? But it doesn't really encapsulate the essence of what this offering does, which is to cancel out or to recompense for the sin that was created or that was committed by mistake. And therefore, the better translations of purification offering or decontamination offering, or as Robert Alter always really hits the nail on the head, an offense offering, okay? Or maybe better yet, okay, a purification or a removal of offense offering. And I think I'm actually going to go ahead and call it a removal of offense offering. Okay, or a purification offering, and this cancels out the sin that you've done by mistake. So it's a cancellation of sin offering, or a recompense of sin, or a purification from sin offering. Okay, and we're going to call it a, let me write it down, in fact, so I don't forget it. I think I wrote it down somewhere last year. Translations. It's going to be second. Translations. Did I write it down? Chatat, chatat, chatat. All right, we'll just call it a purification from sin offering. Or no, I don't even like that. We're going to call it a recompense for offense offering. We'll call it a recompense for offense offering. Let me add this, in fact, to my little list here. So that's Leviticus 4:3. Leviticus 4:3. This over here. Oops. So it's going to be Leviticus 4:3. The Hebrew word is chatat. Okay. The usual translation is sin offering. My translation is going to be a recompense of offense. Recompense of or from offense offering. Okay, cool. Let me just do this. Make this a little bit wider. Okay, let's add some quotes here. And then let's just add, let me actually do this a bit differently. Format, wrapping, wrap. Okay, better. And then I can bring this back in. So recompense from a friend's offering. So Milgram translates it as a purification offering. Everett Fox as a decontamination offering. And Robert Alter as, what did he call it again? An offense offering. And let's add his commentary here. Okay, it removes, because it removes the effects of the offense. Okay, as an offense offering because it removes the effects of the offense. Okay, and we're calling it a recompense from offense offering. Let me wrap this too. Format, wrapping, wrap. Okay, recompense, or maybe even it removes the effects of offense offering. Okay, I think you guys get the idea. Any questions, any comments so far? Shabbat Shalom, Ari and Ben. Any questions, any comments before we move on here? Okay, if not, then let's move on. So we're in verse 4. We now kind of have the essence of what this chatat offering is. Okay, person has sinned. In this case, the first case is the Kohen Gadol. Has sinned. He has transgressed a negative commandment by mistake. And now he is bringing a recompense from transgression, or a recompense from offense offering, right? That's what we're calling it, a recompense from offense offering. Okay, he's making up for his transgression. Verse 4. והביא את הפר אל פתח אוהל מועד לפני Yahweh. So he brings it to the entrance of the tent of meeting before Yahweh. We saw in the past that whenever it says that you bring an offering to the entrance of the tent of the meeting, it doesn't mean right here. Okay, I hope you guys can see that cursor moving up and down. I think so. So it doesn't mean right here at the literal entrance of the tent. It means to the altar that's outside in the courtyard, or near or as you approach the entrance to the tent of meeting. It means what's denoted here is the brazen altar. Okay. So whoever made the sin, in this case, it's the Kohen Gadol, right? He's going to bring this baby bull, this calf, this yearling calf, to the tent, to the altar of sacrifice. Okay. Let's go on. Rest of verse 5. With samach et yado al rosh hapar, with shahat et hapar bifnei Yahweh. So he's going to lay his hands on the head of the calf, and he's going to slaughter the calf before Yahweh. So with the same as all of the other offerings we've seen so far, the person who's bringing the offering, except for the grain offering, obviously, the person who's bringing the grain offering lays his hands on the head of the animal, and then he himself slaughters the animal. It's not the Kohen who slaughters the animal. It's the individual who brought the offering, who brought the sacrifice. He himself slaughters the animal. In this case, it happens to be the Kohen Gadol, because that's who we're talking about. But in other cases, it's the same deal. If you're bringing the sacrifice, you lay your hands on the head of the animal, and then you yourself slaughter the animal. You're transferring your sins, whatever it is, onto the animal, and then you are slaughtering the animal. And that way, symbolically, the sins are transferred off of you and transferred on to the animal, and the animal gets it. You know, the animal mikabel barosh, as I like to say in Hebrew, gets it literally over the head or on the head, and you are set free. Okay, that's why it's called a sacrifice. The animal is sacrificed or it is your sacrifice. He's sacrificing himself or you're sacrificing him instead of yourself. Okay? All right. So let's move on. Verse 5. Wilakach Kohen. We're also supposed to be we wanted to catalog all this stuff too, right? So let me go back and do that. So where are we? Sacrificial laws. Okay. So that was a peace offering. Okay, so we got to pick a color for a sin offering. And we'll make it blue. So what do we got here? So make a bunch of blue ones. And let's go with that color right there. Okay. All right. And so we wanted to be cataloging all these laws, right? So let's go back and do that very quickly. Second. Okay. All right. So if, let's make this our first one that we're adding here. Oops. Let me get rid of this English. It's just sitting around here getting in my way. So if the high priest has sinned, then he brings, so this is Leviticus 4:3. 4:3 offering type is now going to be a sin, or as we're calling it, let's grab our, what do we say? A recompense from offense. Okay. Oops. Oops. Let's try it again. Format. Wrapping. Wrap. Okay. Sin, recompense from offense offering. That's Leviticus 4:3 category. So this is not broken down into different categories here. This is just speaking about one specific animal. So let's put the law. Okay. Verse 3. So if the Kohen Gadol, if it is the high priest who has sinned by mistake, he brings a male calf, or let's say a baby male or baby bull. Okay. An unblemished baby bull. An unblemished baby bull. Okay. As a sacrifice. Okay. Cool. That's that. Then we have Leviticus 4:4. Okay, so we can copy this from elsewhere. So he brings it. Okay, so Leviticus 4:4 says it is brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting, where the person bringing it lays his hands on the head and then slaughters it. And I think the next verse is going to say, no, this is going to be different. Okay. And then slaughters it. Okay, so this is Leviticus 4:4. Leviticus 4:4. Okay. I'll just put this a little bit differently. 1 second here. Okay, good enough. All right, so that's Leviticus 4:4. Let's go on. So now we're in Leviticus 4:5. ולקח הכהן המשיח מדם הפר והביא אותו אל אוהל מועד. So this is a little bit different here, okay? I'm sorry, I skipped the verse. לפני ושמח את ידו ושחט הפר לפני יהוה. No, we did that one. That's 4. Okay, where the person is what is where the person bringing it, which happens to be the high priest in this case, his hands on its head and then slaughters it. Okay, Leviticus 4:5. ולקח הכהן המשיח מדם הפר והביא אותו אל אוהל מועד. So now this is different. This is different from anything we've seen before because this is the Kohen Gadol. This is the high priest. Okay, so the Kohen, the anointed Kohen, which means the Kohen Gadol, he takes from the blood of the calf and he brings it to the tent of meeting. One second here. Let me just. Right. So he takes of the blood. So basically, he drains the blood out into a bowl, is the implication here. Okay. And he takes that blood into the tent of meeting or to the tent of meeting. So let's write that down. So it's Leviticus 4:5. He takes of the blood. So we'll say gathers it. Takes of the blood and brings we'll say it like this, implication being gathers it in a bowl and brings it into the tent of meeting. Okay, that's verse 4:5. Verse 6. ותבל הכהן את אצבעו בדם. So he dips his finger into the blood. ויזע מן הדם 7 פעמים לפני יהוה את פני פרוכת הקודש. And he sprinkles from the blood, or he sprinkles the blood 7 times before Yahweh upon the face of the parochet hakodesh, the curtain that is in the holy area. So let's look again at our map and see what we're talking about here. So this is the tent of meeting right here. And then the tent of meeting is divided into 2 separate places. It's divided into the Kodesh, the holy area, okay, the sanctuary, and then the Kodesh Kedoshim, the Holy of Holies. Inside the Holy of Holies, that's where the Ark of the Covenant is. Top of the Ark of the Covenant is the Ark cover. On top of the the Ark cover is made of 2 cherubim, and between where the 2 cherubim meet, where their 2 faces meet, that's where the glory of Yahweh dwells. That's where it rests. Okay, but the holy area out here, okay, which has on the left over here, which is the south, the menorah. On the right, it has the showbread table, and over here it has the incense altar, is separated from the Holy of Holies, where you have the Ark of the Covenant, by a parochet, by a curtain. And that's the curtain that's being spoken about. So the Kohen Gadol who sinned and caused guilt to the entire people by sinning, right? Because everything he does affects everybody. He's the Kohen Gadol. He's the high priest. Slaughters the sacrifice, collects some of its blood in a bowl, then walks over here in the area of the altar of sacrifice and walks into the holy area or into the tent of meeting. Okay, into the holy area. Remember, he's not allowed to go into the Holy of Holies. He's only allowed to go into the Holy of Holies when? On the 10th day of the 7th month of Yom Kippurim, where he goes in there to basically atone for anything that might have caused transgressions or that might have been done incorrectly, specifically or especially with regards to purity and impurity, cleanliness and rules of cleanliness and uncleanliness. He goes in there and performs a whole ceremony, including going into the Holy of Holies. But this is not the 10th day of the 7th month. This is not the day of Yom Kippurim. So he goes into the holy area, goes over here, right where this curtain is, dips his finger into that bowl and sprinkles the blood 7 times on this curtain, okay, on the curtain that separates the holy area from the holy of holy areas, okay? So it's interesting stuff. All right, so let's get that down. And that is Leviticus 4:6. Let's copy that. Leviticus 4:6. He dips his, let's do it in the order it says. So Leviticus 4:6. Wait a second, do we do 5? All right, yes, 6. He dips his finger into the blood and sprinkles it 7 times. So he dips his finger into the blood and sprinkles it 7 times on the curtain that separates holy from the holy of holies. Okay? So that's Leviticus 4:6. Let's move on. Leviticus 4:7. ונתן הכהן מן הדם על קרנות מזבח קטורת הסמים לפני יהוה אשר באוהל מועד. And there we've reached our semicolon. We've reached our halfway point. This is the etnat. Okay, so let's stop here. The first verset, as I like to call it, the verselet, the first half of verse 7. So the Kohen places or rubs is the implication. The blood, he takes the blood, some of the blood, and rubs it on the horns of the incense altar, on the horns of the altar of the incense, of the spice incense, the incense of spices, before Yahweh, Asher b'ohel moed, before Yahweh, which is in the tent of meeting. Let's go to our map and see what we're talking about here. Okay. So he goes inside here. Here's the incense altar right over here. Okay. He's going to again take the blood. He's going to dip his hand in the blood, and then the incense altar. Let's get a picture of the incense altar. Tabernacle incense altar. Okay, so here's a depiction of the incense altar. Bring that up. Okay, and you notice, and we saw this back in the book of Exodus when we were given specific instructions, or when Moses was given specific instructions on how to construct all of the various parts of the tabernacle. And we saw that the incense altar is constructed with 4 horns, as is the altar of sacrifice out in the courtyard. And now he's going to take the blood and he's going to rub it on each of the 4 horns of the incense altar. Okay, let's get. So that's Leviticus 4:7. So Leviticus 4:7. He takes some of the blood and rubs it on the horns of the incense altar. Okay. Okay. And then it goes on, but it kol damapar, and all of the remaining, it literally says all of the blood, but the implication, of course, is all of the remaining blood of the calf, ishpoch el isod mizbach ha'olah. He will spill at the base of the of the altar. I think I think Everett Fox translates it as slaughter table usually. But we'll go with the altar of the burnt offering altars, Sher Petach Ohel Moed, which is at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So what is that saying? That's saying the rest of the blood, let's go back to here, he's gonna take, so he's only taking some of the blood. The rest of the blood is going to be spilled at the base of the brazen altar, the altar of sacrifice, back out in the courtyard. Okay, so let's get the scene here. He slaughters the calf, collects all of its blood, takes some of the blood in a bowl, walks into the tent of meeting, dips his finger in that bowl on the curtain. Then he takes some more of the blood, rubs it on the four horns of the incense altar. Then he goes back outside and he takes all of the blood that had been collected and he spills it at the base of the altar of sacrifice, the base of the brazen altar, just as we saw with every other single sacrifice. So the big difference here is that this part of the blood of the sacrifice goes into the tent of meeting, into the actual tent of meeting, and is sprinkled against the curtain and rubbed on the altar of sacrifice. This is something we have not seen so far. And the reason that the Kohen, that this is able to be done is because it's the Kohen Gadol. He can enter into this area. None of the other Kohanim can enter into this area. Okay? He can enter into this area. This is a serious sin, and therefore there is a serious recompense for this offense, which involves, actually, you could say, I don't know if you want to use the word defiling, I think that's the wrong word, but staining with blood the furniture inside the tent. It's really amazing when you think about it, that a little bit of the blood is brought inside the tent of meeting, sprinkled against the curtain, and then rubbed on the altar and rubbed on the incense altar. Okay? All right, let's go on. I got to get that down. So, okay. So all of the remaining blood is spilled at the base of the altar of sacrifice. Okay? So that's Leviticus 4. No, that wasn't 6. That was 7, right? That's Leviticus 4:7. And now we're to Leviticus 4:8. It's a pretty long chapter, but we'll get through it, or we won't. Hopefully we will. Verse 8. So now we're going to get some repetition, or we're going to get some similarities to the other animal sacrifices, specifically the other mammal sacrifices that we've seen before. So verse 8. ואת כל חלב חטאת ירים ממנו את חלב המכסה את הקרב ואת כל החלב אשר על הקרב. I'm going to go on to verse 9. ואת שתי הכליות ואת החלב אשר עליהן אשר על הכסלים ואת היותרת על הכבד על הכליות יסירנה. So now we're talking about the fats, sometimes translated as the forbidden fats. Why are they called the forbidden fats? Because we are forbidden to eat them. And we had this discussion last week. We saw the difference between the Karaites and the Rabbinites. The Rabbinites believe that if it's not a sacrifice, you can eat these fats, whereas the Karaites say no. And we explained why we think the Karaite view is correct last week. I'm not going to go through it again, but the Karaites say that it doesn't matter where the animal is, where you slaughter it. You could be in Timbuktu, and you can slaughter an animal, you're not allowed to eat these fats. That's why they're called the forbidden fats. These go always onto the altar of Yahweh, and if they cannot be thrown onto the altar of Yahweh, then they are discarded. They're never to be eaten. This is Yahweh's special food. This is the food of the gods. This is the ambrosia that only the gods, not the gods, in this case, we're monotheists, as far as I remember. So our God, this is only the food for our God Yahweh, the food, quote unquote. Okay. And then we're gonna. So basically, this is almost word for word what we saw with the other sacrifices. In fact, it even says that in verse 10. So let me read verse 10. So kasher yuram mishor zevach hashlamim, just as was lifted up or was taken away from the bull of the peace offerings or the communion offerings. So basically, what that's saying is that it's the same fats that were the same quote unquote forbidden fats that were taken away when we learned about the rules of the peace offerings. It's the same fats. And the Kohen lights them up in smoke, lets them go up in smoke on the altar of burnt offerings. Okay, basically on the altar of sacrifice. Okay, so let's log all of that, and I guess we could just grab. Let's see. Innards. Oh, that's sheep. Let's go back to herd. Okay, so the forbidden fat covering the innards, and all the fat on the innards are thrown on the fire, and the 2 kidneys and the fat on them, and the lobe on the liver. Okay, so we're basically copying this and this. Let's bring it down to here and update it. So this is going to be now Leviticus 4:8. So this is Leviticus 4:8. So this is the forbidden fat. Oh shoot, my computer's about to go. So I'll take a break in a second. Okay, 4:8. So that is the fat covering the innards. And all of the fat on the innards. And it doesn't say anything about are removed. So are removed, not thrown on the fire. Doesn't say that yet. Are removed. So that's verse 8. Verse 9. So verse 9, also the 2 kidneys and the fat on them. Asher salim. Hayuteret al hakaved. Al klayot yasirenu. And the lobe on the liver are removed. So it's the same thing. So this is Leviticus 4:9. Okay. And then Leviticus 4:10 points out, so we can grab this, and I really have to plug in a second. We'll just take this and modify it. So this is now Leviticus 4:10. Okay. And then the essence of what this verse says is it's the same parts, or the same fats as for the peace offering. So these are the same fats as in the peace offering. and the priest throws them on the altar. And the priest makes them go up in smoke, makes them, or I'm just going to say throws them on the altar. Okay, throws them on the altar to go up in smoke. Okay. So that's Leviticus 4:10. So I have to plug in. I have 6% left. And so just give me a second here. I'm not going to put on any music or anything like that. And I'll be right back. Okay, and we're plugged in. Okay. So yeah, we have a ways to go here, but we're just going to trudge through and continue. Okay, verse 11. So that was verse 10. Verse 11, وَإِذْ or Hapar وَإِذْ كل بسرو על ראשו ועל קרעו וקרבו ופרשו. All right, let me just clarify one thing here. One second here. One second. I just want to get something clear in my head. One second, please. One second here. It's not 100% clear to me. I just want to get an idea of what's going on here. So give me a second. The priest shall turn into smoke on the burnt offering on the hide of the bull. Okay, if I understand it correctly, let me look at Everett Fox for a second. Verse 10. One second. Yeah, okay, that makes more sense. Okay. Okay, right. Got it. Okay, got it. Okay. Yeah, I think Everett Fox has it right. So let's go on. So verse 11. وَإِذْ أَوْرَ هَبَارَ وَإِذْ كل بسرو على رشو وعلى كرعه kirbo upirsho. So now, okay, so we saw so far what happened to the fats. The fats are thrown on the altar. The forbidden fats are thrown on the altar. The blood, part of it is sprinkled on the curtain inside the tent of meeting. Part of it is rubbed on the horns of the incense altar. The rest of the blood is spilled at the base of the altar of sacrifice. And now we have, what are we going to do with the rest of the calf, of the baby bull? Well, here we have verse 11. We're speaking about the rest of the bull, and the skin of the calf, et kol besaro, and all of its flesh, al rosho, including its head, al kira'av, and its innards, kirbo upirsho. I'm sorry, kira'av is not innards. Its legs, and its kirbo is its innards, and its waist. They translate that as offal. So let's get just a link on that for 1 second. Yeah, fecal matter. All right. Let me just look up the word offal. So I think offal means something different. Yeah, entrails. So we have two different translations. Let's see what Robert Alter says about that one. And it's dung. So we'll go with Robert Alter. I agree with that one because pirsho means that which is separated out of the animal. So basically, all of the rest of the animal, including all of the parts that are disgusting, that should be discarded, such as the head, the legs, the innards, and the dung. Okay, so what happens with them? So all of these parts, all of the remaining parts of the bull, including the parts that are usually discarded, now they're all going to the same place. Verse 12, he takes all of the calf out of the camp, el makom tahor, to a ritually pure place, el shefach hadeshen, to the ash pile, v'sarafoto al etzim, and he burns it upon wood, ba'esh, with fire, al shefach hadeshen yisaref, and it is burnt on the ash pile, on the pile of ashes. So now we have this other place, which we're going to see for various sacrifices. We have this place outside of the camp where things are going to be burnt. So this animal is not thrown on the altar of sacrifice. The only part that's thrown on the altar of sacrifice is the forbidden fats, because the forbidden fats are always thrown on the altar of sacrifice. This is always the food of Yahweh. But the rest is going to be taken outside the camp to this ash heap, which is a place which is kept ritually pure. And of course, the Kohen Gadol is going to be in a state of ritual purity. And then all of the animal is going to be burnt on the ash heap outside the camp. So the rest of the animal is not given to Yahweh as food, as it was in the case of the fully burnt offering, the holy burnt offering that we saw in Leviticus chapter 1. It's not given as a salary to the Kohanim, as we will see is in the case of a peace offering, which we covered in chapter 2. I believe in the case of peace offering, it is discarded. It's taken and it's discarded on the ash pile outside of the camp, because this is not a happy offering. This is not like a peace offering. This is again, standard translation, sin offering. We're calling it a recompense from transgression offering, or recompense from offense offering. Okay, so this is like a negative offering, or a sad offering, or a bad offering, and therefore it's not given to the Kohanim as food. It's not given to God as food. It's taken out of the camp and it's burnt on the ash pile. It's discarded. Okay, and that's what verses 11 and 12 tell us. So let's translate these. So Leviticus 4:11. Okay. So all of the rest of the cow, so all of the rest of the calf, I'm going to do this Leviticus 4:11 and 12. Let's do it that way. Is that the way I've been doing it in the past? I have 2 verses to cover. I guess I did cover 2 verses. Okay. We'll do it as one. So all of the rest of the calf, including the the skin, the flesh, the head, skin, flesh, head, legs, innards, and dung. Legs, innards, and dung. And continue in the next verse. Leviticus 4:12. So to paraphrase, are taken out of outside the camp and burned on the ritually on in a ritually clean place, which is the ash pile. Okay, so that's what happens to the rest of this baby calf. Okay, that's its fate. And let me just read this again. Votzit kol apar. So verse 12, votzit kol apar. So all of the rest of the animal. The only thing we're not talking about is the blood and the forbidden fat. So all of the rest of the animal is taken el michutz lemachane, taken outside of the camp el makom tahor, to a ritually pure place, el shefach hadeshen, to the ash pile, or the place where the ashes are spilled. V'sorafoto al etzim ba'esh, and he burns it. In other words, the Kohen Gadol burns it on wood with fire. Al shefach hadeshen yisaref, and so on the ash pile, or on the places where the ash is spilled, it's called the ash pile, it is burnt. Okay, so that's that. This is the sin offering, or again, the recompense from offense offering. This is what happens to it. This is the way it is brought if the Kohen Gadol inadvertently, and we'll emphasize the word inadvertently, sins. Okay? Correct. This is all of what the Kohen must do if he sins unintentionally. Correct. That is exactly correct, Paul. That is what the Kohen Gadol must do if he sins unintentionally. Let's go through it again very briefly. Okay? He is going to take a yearling or a baby bull, also known as a calf. He is going to lay his hands on it. Then he's going to slaughter it. Then he's going to collect the blood. He's going to take some of the blood, walk into the tent of meeting, up to the curtain that separates between the holy area and the Holy of Holies. He's going to dip his finger in that blood, in that bowl of blood, and he's going to sprinkle the blood 7 times on the curtain that separates the holy from the Holy of Holies. Then he's going to take some more of the blood on his hands, and he's going to rub them on the horns of the incense altar. And then he's going to go back outside. He's going to spill all of the blood at the base of the altar. He's going to then remove the forbidden fats, and he's going to throw them on the altar of sacrifice, because always the forbidden fats are always thrown on the altar of sacrifice. They're only God's food. No one else is allowed to eat them. That's why they're called forbidden fats. They're forbidden to anyone except Yahweh himself, quote unquote. He's not literally eating them. We spoke about that last week. And then the rest of the animal, including the parts that are usually thrown on the altar in other sacrifices, and including the parts that are usually discarded, now the entire rest of the animal, the good parts and the bad parts, are all discarded. How are they discarded? They're taken outside of the camp. The Kohen Gadol then takes the entire rest of the animal outside of the camp to the ash pile, which is kept in a state of ritual purity, and then he burns the entire rest of the animal, or he burns the entire animal on the ash pile outside the camp. That is what happens, or that is what must happen when the Kohen Gadol, when the high priest inadvertently sins. Okay? And that's it. Okay, so we got through 12 verses, and that's fine. I don't care. I'll spend 10 hours on this if I need to. No, I really want to emphasize that even though it's technical, even though it can be construed as boring, and again, as I like to call it, Torah flyover country, it is really not. When you get the system, when you understand the whole system, it's absolutely brilliant the way everything fits together. So for instance, let's look at this as kind of the opposite of the burnt offering. We learned about the burnt offering in chapter 1. In the case of the burnt offering, everything's thrown on the altar. Everything becomes food for God. Okay? It's like a positive offering, or it's like like the most basic form of offering. You take the entire animal, except for the parts that are to be discarded, and there's mentioned again the skin, the head, the legs. Okay, that never goes to God because that's considered the bitch is in the details. Exactly, Tsuriel. I couldn't have said it better than myself. The bitch is in the details. You hear that, people? Spoken by Tsuriel, the master, who is now going to be opening very soon his own knife shop. So everyone buy Tsuriel's knives because you're going to need to defend yourself in that crazy country if you live in the United States of America or anywhere else in that world for that matter. At any rate, yes. So let's compare. So in the case of the fire offering, I'm sorry, the holy burnt offering, everything except the parts that are always discarded is given to Yahweh. Here we have just the opposite. Here everything is discarded, including the parts that are usually given to the Kohanim or that are given to Yahweh. This is such a serious offense because it's the Kohen Gadol. He's messed up. Okay, he did it by accident. Hopefully, he's not doing it on purpose. Then we really have a problem. So he did it by accident, and so therefore, the entire sacrifice. It's not. He doesn't take it. He doesn't eat it. He doesn't give it to Yahweh as food. He takes it outside and burns it and discards it. That's his recompense for this unintentional sin. Okay. So again, try to see the differences, the similarities, the uses of these various sacrifices, and I think you'll find that it's just, to me, it's absolutely fascinating. Okay, and as exactly as Suri said, it really is so. You know, the we won't say the devil because we're not Christians. We'll say the bitch. Yes, people, the bitch is in the details. I could not have said it better myself. Okay, all right, let's go on to 13. And this entire chapter is the sin offerings, or the, as we're calling it, the recompense from offense offerings. But so now we're going to go into another type, okay, of sin or slash recompense from offense offerings. So from here to here is the Kohen Gadol sins by mistake. Now we're going to see what happens in another situation. Verse 13. So if all of the congregation, what does the word adat mean? It comes from the word, there's two different interpretations, but I believe it comes from the word aid. Aid means witness. So the adat Israel are the witnesses of Israel. These are the real Jehovah's Witnesses, okay? We are the ones who witness to the existence and the greatness of Yahweh. Hold on. Excuse me, everyone. I need to take about a 5-minute break. I'm going to put on some music and we'll be right back. Okay.
שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. אוי 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 אוי, שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, אוי 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 אוי, שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם.
Coming to the edge, running on the water, Trailer for sale or rent, rooms to let 50 cents. No phone, no pool, no pets. Ain't got no cigarettes, but 2 hours of pushing broom buys a 8 by 12 4-bedroom. I'm a man of means by no means, king of the road. Third boxcar, midnight train, destination Bangor, Maine. Whoa, worn out suit and shoes, I don't pay no union dues. I smoke old stogies I have found. Short but not too big around. I'm a man of means by no means. King of the road. I know every engineer on every train, all of the children and all of their names, and every handout in every town, and every lock that ain't locked when no one's around. I sing trailers for sale or rent, rooms to let 50 cents. No phone, no pool, no pets. Ain't got no cigarettes, but 2 hours of pushing broom buys a 8 by 12 4-bedroom. I'm a man of means by no means, king of the road. Trailers for sale, rent, rooms to let 50 cents. No phone, no pool, no pets. I ain't got no cigarettes, but 2 hours of pushing broom buys.
Okay, let's get rid of that. Are you guys? Can you guys still hear me? Can you guys hear me? Okay. Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Somebody let me know if you can hear me, please. I'm assuming yes. Is anybody still there? Okay. All right. This has been a strange Torah study. First of all, barely anyone showed up because I guess they perceive this parsha as a little bit technical and boring. Number two, I've had technical difficulties. Number three, a visitor just walked in. There we go. There's Phil. Number three, a visitor walked in, so I had to spend some time with her. And but we're back. I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna continue. Okay, we'll get as far as we can. I'll go probably for about another hour or so. And as far as we get, that's what we get. Okay. So we are now continuing with, and let me share this differently. Okay. So we are continuing now with this sin offering, or this recompense for offense offering, basically the offering that serves as recompense or purification from a sin that is done. We finished the portion that was speaking about the Kohen Gadol sinning by mistake, okay, inadvertently transgressing a commandment that is given by Yahweh. And now we're going to go. Now we go to the entire congregation, verse 13. Okay, so let's start here in verse 13. Wa'im kol adat Yisrael yishgu une'lam davar me'einei hakahal. So if the entire congregation of Israel should make a mistake, in other words, should sin by accident. It's the same word as we have up here with the Kohen Gadol. Here it says, Ki techteh b'shchagara, if he should sin by accident. Here they use a slightly different wording, but it's the same idea. Okay, yishgu. So shchara, yishgu, it's the same word essentially. Okay, it's the same root. If they should inadvertently or do something wrong inadvertently, when alam davar me'einei hakahal, and this thing is hidden from the eyes of the congregation, the assembly. So again, we're talking about now, it's not just the Kohen Gadol who's inadvertently sinned, but the entire congregation has inadvertently sinned, and they don't know it. Obviously, it was inadvertent. If they did it by mistake, they don't know it. So what would be an example of this? Oh, I don't know. there are times when the congregation had to bring a half shekel of silver. Okay, every male had to bring a half shekel of silver. And let's say that when these coins were made, they weren't coins. Let's say when these half shekels of silver, these weights of silver were made, that it turns out they weren't silver at all. They were tin. You know, there was the ordering got messed up, and instead of ordering silver, they ordered tin. And then all of these weights were made of tin instead of silver, and the entire congregation brought the weights of tin rather than the weights of silver. And it was all just a big mistake. You know, the shipping, Amazon screwed up the order, and so the entire congregation that was supposed to bring a half a shekel of silver instead brought a half a shekel of tin, not sin. Okay, that's a completely made up scenario, but it should illustrate the point. Okay, we have a situation here where the entire congregation, something happened with the entire congregation that went wrong. Okay, and it was an accident, or they ordered from Amazon, 85 tons of meat for the cholent, and it turned out that it wasn't cow meat as they'd ordered; it was horse meat, which actually I think has happened a number of times in kosher restaurants. So those would be silly, but examples that maybe illustrate the point. Okay. So that's the situation we're talking about right here. Let's again go back to our spreadsheet. Let me just make sure this is showing up. It is. So category. So how are we going to do this? I think we could say here. We could put here inadvertent sin. Inadvertent. Is that how you spell inadvertent? No, that's definitely not how you spell inadvertent. Inadvertent transgression. Transgression. Against one of the negative commandments. I don't like that. Against inadvertent transgression of a prohibition, of a negative commandment, Okay. Whoa, that's a mouthful. Inadvertent transgression of a negative commandment. Fine. And the type here is going to be the high priest. The high priest. I'll just put inadvertent transgression. We'll leave inadvertent transgression of a negative commandment. Here's the high priest. And now our next scenario is, so this is going to go under type. This is Leviticus 4:13. This is going to be the entire congregation. Okay. Entire congregation, or entire, let me translate the dot. They usually translate this congregation, right? Congregation. Poor translation, but we'll go with it. Entire congregation. Okay, cool. So there we go. So we're in Leviticus 4:13. Boom. So that's that. And we're putting lines, right? We're putting lines. We're doing lines on these big separations. So let's do a line here. Okay, cool. Leviticus 4:13. Okay. So it continues. And they did one of the, or they transgressed one of the, or they did one of the commandments of Yahweh, which should not be done. And in doing so, they became guilty. Okay, so I gave you examples, silly as they were. I gave you examples just to illustrate the point. So let's just compare verses here. So in the case of the Kohen Gadol, it says, So if the high priest sins and literally to the guilt of the people, or for the guilt of the people, or causing the guilt of the people, here we have the entire congregation sins and they were guilty. Okay, in other words, they incurred guilt by inadvertently sinning. They did something they didn't know, and in doing so, they incurred guilt. In this case, up above, the Kohen Gadol sins, incurring guilt on the entire people. Here, the entire people sin, incurring guilt on themselves. It's the same type of language, okay? But here, the protagonist is the Kohen Gadol, the anointed Kohen, and here, the protagonist is the entire congregation. But the result is that all of the people are now guilty of something. Not guilty by doing something on purpose, but guilty by doing something not on purpose. I don't know. Let's take it in modern times. What would an example be? Oh, you I don't know. I can't think of anything. You go to a different country, and in that country, red lights mean go and green lights mean stop. And you keep on going through green lights. You keep on going through red lights. I'm sorry, you keep on going through green lights because you think they mean go, and in fact they mean stop. I know it's a silly example, but again, it illustrates. Didn't do it on purpose. There was something that caused it that was not known to you at the time. Okay, verse 14. So how are you going to bring a sacrifice if you didn't know you sinned? Well, that's what verse 14 takes care of. We know the asher hatu aleha, and this became, and the sin which they had transgressed, or the transgression which they had committed, became known. ויקריבו הקהל פר בן בקר לחטאת והביאו אותו לפני אוהל מועד. So now the entire congregation, I think they translate kahal officially as assembly, because likahel means to bring together. Where did they get it here? I'm translating that as assembly. So the entire assembly brings par ben bakar, brings a baby bull, a calf, in other words, a male calf, lechatat, as a sin offering. But again, we're not translating this as sin offering. We're translating this as recompense from inadvertent offense offering. A recompense, it's an offering that allows you to get recompense, to basically erase or to pay back in some way the sin that you've committed. And they bring it before the tent of meeting. And again, we know what that means. I can erase this right now. That means here to the altar of sacrifice, to to the brazen altar. Okay. Alrighty. So how do we want to say that? We're gonna grab. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so let's just grab this. Why is this not moving? Oh no, we didn't freeze up, did we? No, we didn't. Okay, let's grab this. If the entire congregation has sinned by mistake, they bring, and we're here in verse 14. They bring, and it doesn't actually mention unblemished, does it? Okay, so it actually doesn't mention the word unblemished, but it's implied. Okay, but I won't include here. They bring a baby bull as a sacrifice. Okay, They become a baby. They bring a baby bull as a sacrifice. Okay, I think that pretty much summarizes Leviticus 4:13. I'm sorry, and 14. Okay, we'll say this is really 13 to 14. I'm gonna do 13 to 14. Okay, no, I'll just do 4. We'll do 14. Okay, because that's the actual commandment. All right, so there we go. That's 14. Okay, 15. Now this is where things you get a little bit interesting, I think. So verse 15 says, "Samchu ziknei ha'edah et yodehem al rosh hapar lifnei Yahweh, v'shahat et hapar lifnei Yahweh." So in the case of the Kohen Gadol up above, when he sinned by mistake, he lays his hands. Let's find that. Okay, v'samachet yado. He lays his hands on the head of the calf and slaughters the calf before Yahweh. Well, now it's not the Kohen Gadol who sinned; it's the entire congregation of Israel who sinned, and they've become aware of it. It's become known. So, who does the laying of the hands on the head of the animal and then the slaughtering of the animal? It's Ziknei Ha'edah, the elders of the congregation. The elders of the congregation. Excuse me, I have to grab some water. I'll be right back. Okay, so in this case, whoops, let me just close the door here. Okay, so in this case, because it's the entire congregation of whatever millions of people can't lay their hands on the head of the animal. So they take representatives, they take elders, and it doesn't mean all of the elders of the community. They take elders, representatives of the community. That's basically what this means. The elders are kind of the council of elders. So they take representatives, elders of the community, and they lay their hands on the head of Yahweh, and it says literally he slaughters the calf before Yahweh. So I think what that means is one of them slaughters the calf before Yahweh. Sometimes this form, this third person perfect or third person past singular implies passive. In other words, it was slaughtered before Yahweh, but I don't think so in this case. I think it means that one of the elders, one of the representatives of the people, slaughters the calf before Yahweh. So that's the way we're going to write it up. This is Leviticus 4:15. Whoa, get back here. What's going on here? Okay, Leviticus 4:15. Oh, I'm running out of blue. Let's extend our blue. Okay, and I could just grab this and repurpose it. So really this is part of 14. 1 second. Moed. If the entire they become aware of it, they bring a baby bull as 1 second here. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna just list this as fine as 14. It's not exactly right, but it doesn't matter. It's close enough. Okay. So it is brought to the entrance of the tent. Meaning. Is brought. One second. Is brought before the tent of meeting. That's a bit more exact. So I get rid of that here. So here, now we have in 15. So we change this to the elders. Elders of the assembly, the congregation. I'll say the community. So I'll say some of or representatives from among the elders of the community lay their hands on its head, and then one of them slaughters it. Okay, I think that pretty much. Now we're going to change the sum of the community lay the hand. Okay, perfect. Okay, so that's Leviticus 4:15. You guys still with verse 16? But we see it's repetitive. That's why I'm able to copy and paste a lot of these verses. There are just some differences, and the devil is in the differences. I'll say this time. Okay, verse 16. Ve'vi hakohen hamashiach midam apar el ohel moed. So now what's going to happen? So it is a sin offering or a purification from sin offering or a recompense for offense offering. So we're going to get that same deal where the high priest is now going to take it to the tent of meeting. Okay. So we're going to get the same thing. Okay. So let's copy this. Bring it down here. I'm going to say the high priest. So the high priest gathers the blood, takes of the blood, and brings it into the tent of meeting. Leviticus. So that's Leviticus 4:16. Okay, so just like in the case where the Kohen Gadol up above sinned, he has to now gather some of the blood in a bowl and bring it into the tent of meeting. This time it's a little bit different. Now the entire congregation sinned. The elders of the community, some of the elders of the community, they're the ones who lay their hands, that representing the entire community. They lay their hands on the head of the calf, and then one of them slaughters it. And now they can't. The elders are laymen. They're not priests, right? They're laymen. They're lay Israelites. So they cannot take the blood inside the tent of the meeting. Only the high priest is allowed to enter the actual tent of meeting. So now the high priest takes over. He gathers the blood, and he brings it into the tent of meeting. And then we're going to have basically a repetition of what happened before inside the tent of meeting. So that's 4:16. Okay, 4:17. Utaval hakohen etz ba'o min hadam wahiza sheva pa'amim lifnei Yahweh et pnei haparochet. So now he's going to do exactly the same thing or now the Kohen Gadol taking over for representing the entire congregation, is going to sprinkle the blood 7 times. Is going to sprinkle blood from the sacrifice 7 times onto the curtain. So let's copy that. Right, just like up above, except now the elders represent the entire community in the slaughter, in the laying of the hands and slaughtering of the sacrifice, and the Kohen Gadol represents the entire community in walking into the tent of meeting, because only the Kohen Gadol can walk into the tent of meeting. and doing the same things that he would have done in the previous case. Okay, and then brings the tent of meeting. So he dips his finger, blah blah blah. Okay, so that's that. That's Leviticus 4:17. So you see what I say when I say it all forms a very logical system. There's so much repetition. So there's similarities, there are many similarities, and there are many differences. And categorizing all of that, categorizing all that, is really where we see how the sacrificial system works, right? By seeing the similarities across the various types of sacrifices and seeing the differences, okay, and trying to understand what these sacrifices are used for. I mean, I've repeated it many times. Maybe it's like, you what's the expression? Methinks thou dost protest too much. Maybe I'm trying to push it, but I personally really think this stuff is fascinating. Okay, and you better too, or else. Okay. So Yahweh et Pnei Parochet. So we oh shoot, now I'm frozen again. Oh, duty balls. Oh, I'm unfrozen. Thank God. Am I unfrozen? I don't know. Uh-oh. Oh shoot, I think I have to start the computer again. Oh, darn it. I think I'm frozen. All right. I'm gonna have to restart the computer, guys. This has been a weird one, but I have no choice. Oh, wait, did I unfreeze? No. Frozen. Oh shoot. All right, I'll give it one more second. I see the beach ball turning. You guys have been with me week after week, know what that means. It usually means I have to restart the computer. But let me give it another second to see if it clears itself. If not, then I'm gonna just restart the computer. And it'll take me about 5 minutes to get back on. Wait, are we back? No, we're not. Okay, I have to restart the computer, guys. I'll be back in about 5 minutes. Sorry about that. Okay, I think we're back. I'm going to assume we're back. If somebody can give me a sound check and just let me know if you can hear me, that would be great. But I think we're back. It happens every time. There's nothing I can do about it. Okay, cool. It happens only when I'm running this service, StreamYard. Okay, so where were we? Okay. So we were in Okay, so he dips his finger. Let me make this a bit larger. So he dips his finger in the blood and sprinkles it 7 times on the curtain that separates the blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that was 417. And then we go to 418, and I'll just paraphrase here so we can get through this a little bit quickly. So it's the same thing. He takes some of the blood and rubs it on the horns of the altar, of the incense altar, and then takes all of the rest of the blood at the base of the altar of sacrifice. So we can just copy this also. So it's basically the same as Leviticus 4:7. This is Leviticus 4:18. Okay. So I think it's actually almost word. I think is it word for word? Min Adam. Tanach-only min Adam. Okay, it's not exactly the same word for word, but it's the same thing. Okay, verse 19. ואת כל חלבו ירים ממנו ויתיר המזבחה. And now he's going to remove the forbidden fats and throw them onto the altar. Okay, so that's we see always, right? One of the things that is immutable. The forbidden fats always get thrown on the altar. That's why they're called forbidden. It's a sacrifice. The forbidden fats always get thrown on the altar. We, as human beings, do not eat them, and they are not discarded in the ash heap or anything like that. They are always thrown on the altar. That is God's favorite food. It's his, as I gave the example last week. You know, I remember my grandfather when I was growing up. I was too young to remember this, but my mom would always tell me that he loved when he would make chicken, or when the family would make chicken. He said he loved the chicken neck, the neck of the chicken. That was his favorite part. Okay, no one else was allowed to eat the chicken neck. Okay, it was always his. That's the idea here. These forbidden fats are always Yahweh's. These are his favorite part of the animal, and that's what he likes. You don't give it to anybody else. You save those forbidden fats for him. Okay, so let's just catalog that. So it's Leviticus 4:19. And let's see if we could just copy and paste. So they don't go through listing all the forbidden fats, because this time it's pretty clear, right? It's because this is a repetition, or I won't say repetition, but this is a variation of the sin offering, or the sin offering here up above that involved the Kohen Gadol. It's the same idea, except now this involves the entire congregation. So the implication here, right, by analogy or by parallelism, okay, or just by common sense, this clearly means those same forbidden fats. Okay, and in fact, the next verse is going to allude to that, to the idea that it's the same. So, verse 19, the forbidden fats are removed and thrown on the altar. Oh, sacrifice. On the altar, it's clear. Okay. I'll say altar of sacrifice. And the only other altar is the incense altar. No one would think you'd throw forbidden fats on the incense altar. Whatever. Okay. Verse 20. And believe it or not, we're kind of getting close to the end, but let's move ahead. Verse 20. לפר אשר עשה לפר החטאת, כן יעשה לו, וכיפר עליהם הכהן והנסלח להם. Okay, and so this calf is prepared. Let me read word for word. And they will do to the calf kasher salapar chatat, as they did it says the part of the sin offering. Okay, and what is that talking about? That's talking about up above. So again, sin is used a bunch of times, and it even says here sin offering. So what does it mean that okay. When it says, well, what else could when it's the Kohen Gadol that's the transgressor. So it's the same thing. Basically, it's talking when it says the sin offering means the first detailed explanation of how the sin offering is prepared. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, first of all, let me log it. Okay, so he does to the calf, to this calf, the same that is done to let me see, how can I word this? He does to this calf, or he prepares, I'll say this, prepares this calf in the same way as described in detail in the previous scenario. I think that's the best way to put it. Okay. And what does that mean? Okay. He takes all of the rest of the calf, the skin, the flesh, the head, the legs, the innards, and the dung. Okay. And let me just add here. That would be, see Leviticus 4:11. Okay. And that is here, that's 4:20. Leviticus. And then Leviticus 4:21, והוציא את הפר אל מחוץ למחנה, ושרף אותו כאשר שרף את הפר הראשון, חטאת הקהל הוא. So he takes it, out of the camp and burns it the same way as was described in the previous scenario. Okay, and that's Leviticus 4:21. Okay. Sean, you see the little etnach there? That's the end of the first part of the verse. Second part of the verse says, Chatat kalhu. This is the sin offering, or this is the rectification from transgression offering for the community, for the entire community. And that's the end of that second scenario. First scenario, what did the Kohen Gadol inadvertently sin? Second scenario, what did the entire congregation inadvertently sins, and then only later becomes aware of it. Okay. Now we're going to go on to the third scenario. So, any questions? Any comments so far? No, Paul. We had a big storm last week, and the Starlink went down. We had a big storm, and Starlink went down. In fact, it was so windy that we have it on the roof, and it's very steady. It's very sturdily secured, but it's not like nailed into the roof or anything like that. It's just very heavy. So we had it on the roof, and the winds were so strong. I think they were probably maybe gusts of maybe 25, even 30 miles an hour, that they upended the Starlink satellite, the Starlink dish, and it went down on its side and stopped working. So I'm actually on the old Wi-Fi, which is the old ADSL technology, and we're waiting for Elon. I spoke to him personally yesterday. He and I were BFFs. We speak at least 2-3 times a week, and so he's personally making sure that a new one gets sent out in the next couple of days. So I'm just waiting for that. There must have been flies everywhere. I don't know. Would dry blood on a curtain? First of all, this is not a sacrifice that's going to be brought very often. Okay, that's number one, right? How often is the Kohen Gadol going to sin? How often is the entire congregation going to sin? That's number one. Okay, number two, there are we'll get to it, but there are different sects or clans of the Levites who are responsible for different parts of the tent of meeting when it's being moved, and I guess it's conceivable that they are responsible also for cleaning the various parts of the tent of meeting. Another possibility is that on Yom Kippurim, when the temple is cleansed of its impurities, and that means kind of a quote unquote spiritual cleansing of its impurities, maybe also, I don't know, maybe they give it a good wash down. Why don't they use the tabernacle now since there's no temple? So that's a very excellent question. And the answer is that once Yahweh revealed the place where he is going to make his name dwell, then there's no more moving around. Once Jerusalem, specifically Mount Moriah in Jerusalem, was revealed as the place where Yahweh decided to settle down, then there's no more sacrificing anywhere else in the world except that one place. So sacrifices are to be brought only on the Temple Mount, on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem. One God, one place of sacrifice. As Jeremiah says, accusing Israel of when they went off the derech, when they went off track, and the word track comes from the word derech, then when they went off track and were sacrificing to all kinds of different gods, Judah, you have as many gods as you have towns. Okay, so many gods, many places of sacrifice on every high hill and under every leafy tree. That's the way the pagans do it. That's the way the idol worshippers do it. We have one place of sacrifice, and that one place of sacrifice, there was some flexibility. We will see sacrifices being offered in different places until that one place was being pointed out. And I don't mean just where the tabernacle was, but also outside the tabernacle. But once that place was pointed out as Jerusalem, and this is done at the end of the second book of Shmuel, okay, when you have the whole incident, second book of Shmuel, Kings, second book of Shmuel. I think the end of the second book of Shmuel, when you have the whole incident where David counts the people and then sins, and in the end, to make a long story short, an angel appears and is about to destroy Jerusalem, but David goes up to the threshing floor of Araunah and offers sacrifices there, and then offers to purchase the threshing floor of Araunah as a place where ultimately would be chosen to build the temple, and that was Mount Moriah. Okay, so is that actually happening? No, it's absolutely not happening, Desiree. Oh boy, I don't know how to explain this except to tell you a story about when I first came to Israel on June 23rd, 1993. That was the first time I ever in my entire life set foot in Israel as a young man, and I knew nothing about the place. I just knew I had to see it from my own eyes, and so I went there. And the first thing I did when I got there is I went down to the Kotel, which is the Western Wall, and I knew nothing about nothing. And I was standing there in awe, and I was feeling like the spirit of Yahweh is like surging through me. I'd never felt anything like it in my entire life. Certainly not in New York where I grew up. That's for darn sure. And I remember I'm standing there, and I look up, and I see there's a mosque on top of the Temple Mount. And I was shocked. I had no idea what was going on. I'd never been to Jerusalem before. I knew nothing about Israeli politics. I knew nothing about nothing, to be honest. I was just kind of getting back into Torah. The only Torah I'd ever had in my life before that was just going to Hebrew school as growing up in a conservative Jewish community in the suburbs of New York, which basically means not much. And I'm standing there and I look up and I say to myself, above the Western Wall, I see a giant mosque, the Dome of the Rock. And I had no idea there was a mosque. I was shocked. I didn't know until that moment that there was a mosque on top of the Temple Mount. And in my naivety and my innocence, in my innocence of not knowing, everything that is so obvious to Jews and Israelis today, or to Israelis at least, I walked over to someone and I said, "Excuse me, can you explain to me why is there a mosque on top of the Temple Mount?" And the guy looked at me and started laughing and then walked away. And I knew something was strange from that moment. And in my years in Israel, it only became stranger. That's an absolutely 100% true story. So I hope that answers your question, Desiree. There's a mosque on top of our Temple Mount. Okay? That was the first of many, 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 many surprises that were to be revealed to me in Israel. It boggles the mind, some of the things I've seen in Israel. Okay. So, right. Now we're going to go on to the third scenario, which is a nasi. So a nasi is usually translated as a prince. That's a pretty poor translation, I would say. Let's see here. They translate it here, and we'll go to a Robert Alter translates a ruler. So a nasi literally means an exalted one, okay, or a one who is raised above the rest of the communication of the rest of the congregation, okay, a leader. And here actually they do translate as leader, but it literally means an exalted one who rises up above the rest of the people to lead, okay, or to be a leader, or to be a person of who is in a position of leadership. Okay. Let's see how Robert Alter translates that one. So that's Leviticus 4:22. I'm gonna have to stop soon, but that's okay. I think we're at 888, if I remember correctly, because it's good luck if you're Chinese. So Robert Alter translates that as, oh boy, what verse is this? 22. 22. Chieftain. Okay, so he goes with chieftain. Everett Fox translates nasi. Oops. Leader. Okay, and the NIV here translates it also as the leader. So let's go with leader. Okay, so when a leader among the people, yachta, when he sins, so same scenario, when he transgresses one of the negative commandments of Yahweh, or one of the commandments of Yahweh, his God, which should not be done. So he transgresses a negative commandment, like, you get the idea. Again, by mistake, inadvertently, unintentionally, Hashem, and becomes guilty. Okay, so it's the same formula exactly. Okay, he sinned, he transgressed unintentionally, but he's guilty of something, even though he didn't intend it. He's not guilty in the sense of consciously guilty, but he's done something wrong, even though he doesn't know he did it, even though he's not aware of it. Okay, he ate possum thinking it was beef, and now he's guilty of eating possum, even though he didn't do it on purpose. Okay, so same scenario. So let's add this here. This is verse 22, and we're going to go here. Entire congregation, leader. Say leader among the people. Leader of the people. Let's just say leader. That's what it says. Let me add a little more blue. Right, and now by this time we can expect a lot of the same laws, right? They should be similar, maybe even practically identical, okay? So this gets a line above. Okay, we have leader. So this is Leviticus 4:22. Oh, I'm not doing it that way. So we're going to do leader. I really have to stop in about 10 minutes at the latest. Okay. Verse 23, or hod'a elau hatato, or he was informed of his sin, asher hata ba, which he had committed, va'hivi et korbanot sa'ir izim zachar tamim. Okay, so now we have a little bit of a variation. So in this case, let's try to copy and paste this much as possible. A leader among the people has sinned by mistake, and he's informed, becomes aware of it maybe, and he is informed of it, because it really is a slightly different form. The verb is informed of it. So this time, so he's going to bring a Sa'ir Izim Zachar Tamim. So what is the Sa'ir Izim Zachar Tamim? Let's go to our spreadsheet for our animal names. Okay, so Sa'ir is a baby goat. Okay, Izim is the plural of Ez. So again, just solidifying goat. So he's bringing, not this time for the previous two scenarios, when it was the Kohen Gadol or when it was the entire congregation, a baby bull is brought, a calf is brought. Here, this time, it's a baby goat. Why a baby goat and not a baby bull? Because the leader is not as important a position as the high priest and is not as encompassing as the entire congregation. So it's going to be a less expensive, or a less, shall we say, severe, a less, we'll go with expensive sacrifice that's brought. Because the sin is not as bad because he doesn't have as high as a position as the Kohen Gadol, and he doesn't have as encompassing a result of sinning as the entire congregation when they sin. So this time it's going to be a baby goat. Right, so should we put down baby? Okay. So let's go back. Let's go back to here. Oh, we have to go back to our other sheet. So sinned by mistake and is informed of it. Let's modify this. He brings a kid, baby goat, as a sacrifice. Okay? And it's a male. He brings a male kid as a sacrifice. Okay? And it doesn't say any. Okay. And this is Leviticus 4:23, basically. Leviticus 4:23. Okay. Very good. Alrighty. Tamim. And I should say an unblemished. Okay. Leviticus 4:23, 4:24. I think we'll get through this, and then I'm gonna have to stop. I really do need to stop. Okay. ושמח ידו על ראש השעיר ושחט אותו במקום אשר ישחט את העולה לפני יהוה חטאת הוא. So basically, it's a repetition. It's the wording is slightly different, but it's the same idea. Okay, so this person, this leader who has sinned, lays his hands on the head of the kid, of the baby goat, and then slaughters it. במקום אשר ישחט את העולה, in the same place that the burnt offering, the holy burnt offering is slaughtered lifnei Yahweh, before Yahweh. And we know that that is a reference to, again, this, come up. Oh, there we are. We know this is a reference to the brazen altar, to the altar of sacrifice. Okay, chatatu, and it is a sin offering, or again, we're calling it a rectification from offense offering, but usually translated, or generally translated as sin offering. Okay, so we can copy and paste here. Okay, and we can repurpose. So he lays his hands on its head and then slaughters it at the second. Hello? What the hell am I listening to? What's going on here? Do I have this connected and I haven't been speaking into it the whole time? No, I don't. I don't know what's going on. Strange. Okay, so he sacrifices it in the place where and slaughters it at the place where the holy burnt offering is slaughtered. I don't want to. I'm gonna at the altar of sacrifice. The sacrificial altar. Okay. So that's Leviticus 4:24. Okay, so far everything is pretty much the same, except that it's a goat this time. And we're going to see something else that's interesting. Verse 25, ולקח הכהן מדם החטאת באצבעו ונתן על קרנות מזבח העולה, ואת דמו ישפוך על יסוד מזבח העולה. So because this is a less important position in Israel, we don't have the whole section or the whole bit where the blood is collected by the Kohen Gadol, who then brings it inside the tent of meeting, sprinkles it on the curtain 7 times, and then rubs it on the altar of sacrifice. No, this time what happens is the blood is collected, or when the blood is collected, the Kohen Gadol takes it in the chatat be'etzba'o, so he takes it on his finger and he rubs it on the horns of the altar of sacrifice. So remember, with the previous two, the Kohen Gadol goes inside, sprinkles it on this curtain, and then rubs it on the horns of the altar of incense. This is a less important position. It's an important position, but a less important position. So this person's sin doesn't have the same level of consequences as would the sin of the Kohen Gadol or the sin of the entire congregation. So there's no sprinkling, there's no walking inside the tent of meeting. There's no sprinkling on the curtain. There's no rubbing on the horns of the altar of incense. Which is considered basically holy of holies, right? Whereas the altar out here doesn't have that same level of sanctification or of importance. It's important, of course, but not as much. It's not as close to Yahweh, shall we say, as is the altar of sacrifice. And so he takes his fingers and then he rubs it on the horns of this altar outside. So it's not a bull, it's a goat. No, there's no sprinkle of blood on the curtain or rubbing on the altar on the horns of the altar of incense. Instead, it's just rubbed on the horns of the altar of sacrifice. Okay, so let's take that. So, and let me use the language of it. So I could just copy and paste this more or less, and then we'll just modify it. So he takes some of the blood with his finger and rubs it on the horns of the sacrificial altar, or the altar of sacrifice. Okay. And the remaining is spilled at the base of the altar. So we can leave this. All the remaining blood is spilled at the base of the altar. And I think altar sacrifice is implied. Okay, so the remaining blood is spilled at the base of the altar. Okay, cool. So that's Leviticus 4:25. Leviticus 4:25. Then Leviticus 4:26 is the last portion of this section, right? Of this scenario. So verse 26, ואת כל חלבו יקטיר המזבחה כחלב זבח השלמים. כחלב זבח השלמים, וכיפר עליו הכהן מחטאתו ונסלח לו. Okay. So then all of the forbidden fats are burned on the altar. So let's see if we can grab that. So the forbidden fats, so we'll say like this. The forbidden fats are burned on the altar. Burned. Let's see if I can spell burn correctly. Burn on the altar. Okay. Just like and then it says just like with the peace offering. Okay. So it's not going to give us all the details. Okay. But it says just like the scenario with the peace offering, it's just like the rules for the peace offering. Torah often does this. Okay. Just like with the peace offering. Okay, well, now we have to look for a second, very briefly, what it says about go. So this is the peace offering. So instead of repeating itself, the Torah just refers back to the peace offering. That's Leviticus chapter 3. And if we scroll down, then we have a situation where it's a goat. I'll go over to the English for a second so we could just go through this quickly because I've got to stop now. Okay. So if your offering is a goat, this is a peace offering. You're to present it before the Lord, lay your hands on its head, slaughter it in front of the tent of meeting. Then Aaron's sons shall splash blood against the sides of the altar. From what you offer, you are to present this food offering to Yahweh, the internal organs and all the fat that is connected to them, both kidneys with fat of them near their loins and okay. For what you offer, you are to present this food offering to Yahweh, the internal organs, and all the fat that is connected to them, both kidneys and the fat on them near the loins, and the long lobe of the liver, which you remove with the kidney. So those are the forbidden fats of the goat. in the sin and the peace offering, and it's the same thing. Okay, so see Leviticus 3:14 through 15. I'll reference here. Okay, see Leviticus 3:14 through 15. Okay, and this is okay. The priest shall burn them on the altar as a food offering, a pleasant aroma. All the fat is the Lord's. I guess I could say 16. No, not really. 16, good enough. 14 through 15. Okay, let's go back. To Leviticus 4. Okay. Okay, and what happens? So the forbidden fats are burned on the altar, just like the peace offering, just like the case of, or following the same rules. How can I phrase this? Just like with the peace offering, okay? Following the same procedure as with the peace offering. See Leviticus 3:14 to 15, fine. And this is Leviticus 4:26. Leviticus 4:26. And then we have an interesting statement here, which we didn't have. I don't think we did. No. So we have an interesting statement here, which we don't have in the first two scenarios, but which applies clearly to all of these scenarios for these recompense from offense offerings. And it says, and the Kohen, by doing so, will have atoned for him from his offense, from his sin, and he is forgiven. So that's the whole idea. By bringing these recompense from offense offerings, these sin offerings, these rectification of sin offerings, this allows the person to be forgiven. After he brings his offering, he's forgiven for whatever sin he had inadvertently committed. Okay? This, since it's not an actual law, we won't add it here. But it's an interesting phrase, okay? And that's the end of that section. Let's just read very quickly through to the rest with minimal commentary, just so we can get some kind of closure, okay? So verse 27, you guys still with me? Barely, huh? V'im nefesh achat techta b'shchara me'am ha'aretz asutta achad mimitzvot Yahweh shelo te'asena v'ashem. So this is now a case of just one of the ordinary laymen, me'am ha'aretz. So from the people of the land, this is just speaking about an ordinary layman, just an ordinary Israelite, not a leader, not the entire congregation, not the Kohen Gadol, just an average, Joe Schmo, or an average, Levi Schmo, or whatever, right? An average Shimon Schmo. Sins, then by mistake, then this is the law for him. Okay? Or he's informed that he's in sin, right? We're talking about laymen here. They may not always know. And someone may walk up and say, I noticed that you were eating a possum yesterday. Did you know that a possum is not kosher? The next time you're out on the I-10, you should keep in mind that, not to scrape off an opossum. Right, my friends in Texas? I'm sorry, I'm really pushing this joke way too far today. Okay, but this is the case, right? So he doesn't know, so maybe he's going to be informed. He's just a layman after all. He's not going to know all of the laws like the Kohen Gadol would, or like a leader would be expected to be. So now he's not going to bring a male goat. He's bringing a female goat, which is even a less expensive animal than a male goat. Okay, male goat is bigger, can be used for meat more readily. It's more expensive, right? The male animals are generally more expensive than the female animals. Verse 29, I'm not going to catalog here. I'm just going to read through. Okay, I'm not going to do the spreadsheet. So he's going to lay his hands. This person who sinned, this average ordinary layman, this average Israelite, Mina Shura, as they say, just one of the crowd or one of the bunch, is going to now lay his hands on the female goat and then slaughter it. And then the Kohen Gadol is going to take some of the blood and rub it onto the horns of the altar of sacrifice, right? So just like in the case of the leader, it's being rubbed on the altar of sacrifice. And the rest of the blood, all the rest of the blood, he's going to spill on the base of the altar of sacrifice. Verse 31. And then it's going to be the same scenario as when you're with a peace offering, when you're sacrificing a female goat. See the details there. And then the Kohen is going to throw it onto the altar for it to go up and smoke. The as a sweet smelling scent to Yahweh. And the Kohen, by doing so, will succeed in gaining atonement for him, and he will be forgiven, and he is forgiven. Okay. Now this is interesting. This is the first time we see that it's a sweet smelling scent. Even in the case of a sin offering, it's called here a sweet smelling scent. So the Torah reuses some of these phrases, okay, like sweet smelling scent, but it doesn't use it every single time. But it really applies to all of them, okay? So that's the average person, the average layman, Israelite layman who sins, and he brings a female goat. But he's another choice, and we see this throughout the sacrificial system. Sometimes you have a choice. If you can't afford a goat, you could bring something else. In this case, a lamb. Or maybe you're not a goat farmer. Maybe you're a lamb farmer. So you bring a lamb instead. Okay. V'im keves yavi korbano. So if he chooses to bring a keves, okay, keves is a lamb. Korbano chatat mikevat mima yavienu. It should be a female, an unblemished female. Okay. So female goat or a female lamb. And he's going to slaughter it. He's going to lay his hands and slaughter it, just like the previous case or all of the previous cases. So once again, he's going to take from the blood of this baby female lamb, I say baby female lamb because sometimes lamb is just used to mean in general and incorrectly, but sometimes it's done. And then he's going to rub it on the horns of the altar of sacrifice. So no big surprises there. And then he's going to remove the forbidden fats, just as in the case or in the same way that they did for the peace offering. This is now the Kohen, of course, who's going to do this. Okay. And the Kohen takes over at the collection of the blood and does all the rest of the ceremony. Okay. So again, you have to go back and reference the peace offerings to see exactly the details of that. This is referring us back to chapter 3 with the peace offerings. Okay. So he throws it onto the altar for it to go up and smoke al ishe Yahweh upon the fire offerings, or as one of the fire offerings of Yahweh. Maybe it's possible to like that as kohen and al chatato asher chatav v'nislach lo. And in doing so, the Kohen will have gained atonement for him for his sin, which he had committed, and he will be forgiven, and he is forgiven. Okay, so that's it. So we have 4 scenarios for sin offering. So let's just summarize very, very briefly, and then I've got to go because I'm already running over time. Okay, so a sin offering, bad translation. Put a big X against that. We saw that Robert Alter translates it as an offense offering, and that's really short for recompense or reconciliation for offense offering. We saw that that Everett Fox translates it as a, what was it? Not a disinfection offering. Let me look again. Decontamination offering. We saw that Milgram translates it as a purification offering. So the idea of this sin offering, which we are calling what are we calling it again? We're calling it a recompense for offense, or recompense from offense offering. Is that if you've sinned unintentionally, okay, if you've sinned intentionally, you're in a whole different world. You're in a world of trouble there. That's between you and God already. Okay, that's also spoken about. But if you've sinned unintentionally, okay, then these sacrifices, these compensation or these reconciliation of unintended offense offerings, they take effect. They can be brought in order for you to receive forgiveness. They serve as atonements, and the end goal of being that the person who's committed the sin or the people who've committed the sin receive forgiveness for what they've done, since after all it was done unintentionally. It wasn't on purpose. You weren't deliberately defying God. Maybe you're just a stupid idiot and you weren't paying attention. Maybe you were distracted. Maybe you just didn't know, right? Ignorance of the law is a justifiable defense in the Torah. Okay, you didn't know, so you bring these sacrifices. Generally, what's going to happen with the sacrifices is they're going to be slaughtered. The offending person or people are going to lay their hands on the sacrifice. Then that person or people, or they themselves or the representatives, are going to slaughter the sacrifice. The blood is going to be collected. It's going to be rubbed on an altar. If it's a higher position, then it's going to be rubbed on the altar of incense and sprinkled on the curtain that separates between the holy area and the Holy of Holies. If it's a less important position within Israel, then it's going to be rubbed on the horns of the altar of sacrifice out in the courtyard. Then afterwards, the fats are going to be removed always, or I should say first, the blood is going to be, all the rest of the blood that is collected is going to be spilled at the base of the altar of sacrifice. All of the forbidden fats are going to be removed and thrown on the altar of sacrifice, because forbidden fats are always thrown on the altar of sacrifice. And then the rest of the animal, well, we don't know what happens with the rest of the animals here, and I'm not really sure. I'd have to look into it a little bit more. But in the case of the first two, the highest positions, or the Kohen Gadol and the entire congregation, then the entire rest of the animal is not given to the Kohen. It's not burned on the altar of sacrifice. In contrast to the holy burnt offering, all of which is burnt on the altar of sacrifice. It's all the rest of the animal is taken outside the camp, and it's burned on the ash pile. Okay, and that's it. That's the end of the ceremony. And in carrying out these various ceremonies, okay, the person is given atonement for his sin, his inadvertent sin. He gets recompense. He's able to recompense for his inadvertent sin, and he's forgiven for his sin. Okay, and the four scenarios we said are the Kohen Gadol, the entire congregation, a leader among the people, and just one of the people. And that kind of sums up Leviticus 4. And we're going to stop here. I hope you enjoyed it. I really do. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it's very technical. And as I've said many times, and I'll say it again, I think one of the shames, one of the things that's such a shame about studying the Torah is that these technical portions of the Torah, let's say the second half of the book of Exodus, where it describes in excruciating, or some people think excruciating, I love it, in great detail, the building of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. Here throughout the book of Leviticus, we have described in great detail that the various facets of the worship, or the systematic, the correct word is cultic, but that's a loaded word in this day, the systematic worship of service to Yahweh. I think these things are absolutely, absolutely fascinating. And yes, we didn't read even a single word from our Parsha. And you know what? I don't care, because I would rather spend, and we've spent now 3 weeks going just through Leviticus 1, 2, 3, and 4. We've covered 4 of the 5 types of sacrifices. Next time, we'll maybe do Leviticus 5, which is the last type. That's the sin sacrifice. I'm sorry. Yeah, we'll do the last type, okay? Right. I'm sorry. This is the sin offering still. Goes into more details about the sin offering. And then the last type is the asham, the guilt offering. Okay? So maybe we'll talk about that next time. And then if we do, we will have, it's almost like completing a master class in the types of sacrifices and the rules of the basic 5 types of sacrifices. The burnt offering, or as we're calling it, the holy burnt offering, the grain offering, the grain fire offering, the grain offerings that are thrown onto the altar of sacrifice, the peace offerings, or the peace offering, the sin offering, or as we're calling it, the recompense from inadvertent transgression offering, and then the guilt offering. Those are the 5 types of. There are others. There are other things you can bring as that are thrown onto the altar, but those are the 5 basic types of sacrifices. Okay, so again, to use the standard translation: burnt offering, grain offering, sin offering, no, peace offering, sin offering, guilt offering. Okay, and we've gotten now through 4 of those 5, which is pretty darn good. So we're going to stop here. I thank you all for joining me. Now all of a sudden, a bunch of people showed up. I don't know why. I thank you all for joining me, and sorry about the various technical details. There was a lot going on here today, and I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov wherever you are in the world, and we will Be'ezrat Yahweh pick it up once again next week. So we'll go out with some music. You guys, this does 2 things, which is A, it's nice to end with some music, and it also allows you guys to chat back and forth among yourselves after the study is over about whatever topics you want. So we're going to end it here. I'll put up music for about 5 minutes or so, and then we'll go offline. So thank you once again. This has been Hakham Melech Ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, wishing you all a... Where am I? It's dark in here. That's why it's doing that weird thing. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov, and we'll see you again soon.
אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל. השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה. השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, שא עיני להרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מרים השם, עושה שמיים וארץ. אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל. השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה. השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. na 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 שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. אוי 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 אוי, שיר למעלות, אשא עיני אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אני אתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. אוי 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 אוי, שיר למעלות.